Welcome to Rivendell, Frodo Baggins.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Lowlands Wargaming and to another video on our channel. We're covering the new MESBG edition and I couldn't be more excited about it. Now the eagle-eyed among you might be wondering, why is this a video? Why is it on the YouTube channel? And you're correct, this is a podcast episode. This is a very long 4-hour podcast episode covering all of the rules changes of the core rules of the new edition. And normally this kind of long form content is something that we don't put on the channel, and we purposely keep it for audio only purposes on Spotify, on Apple Music and things like that. But this coverage and this topic is so big, I also wanted to expose it to you guys on the YouTube channel and give you the option to listen to it here, or at the very least be aware of it and leave you with the links so that you can watch it on your own. It's a long one. I want to thank Tim for all of his work in editing the podcast itself. That's a lot of work that went into it. Also a lot of preparation work went into it. We went through the entire rulebook ahead of time to make sure that we made a list of all the things that we thought might change. These are all my notes, and I'm happy to say that all the things that I wanted, suspected, or somehow figured might change, that all of those were actually touched in the core rules. So that's why it's a 4-hour long podcast. A lot of things have changed in this new edition, some big, some small, and we tried to cover all of them in one fell swoop, so that once you've listened to this, or watched it, I suppose, you should be able to get right into the game. Just grab the new profiles and play as you were used to, except now with an understanding of the new rules. And the rest of this video is just going to be a logo from Lowlands Wargaming. It is a podcast, so for your listening pleasure, you might find it more convenient to switch over to Spotify or one of the other platforms, Apple Music. We have a Podbean link. I'll leave the links to that in the description, so you could just switch off here. But if not, enjoy watching our beautiful Lowlands Wargaming logo while also listening to our assessment of the rules changes in this new edition. Thanks so much for your attention, your time, and your support. I'm truly curious to hear what you think of this new edition and whether we missed anything. I don't think we did. I think we were pretty thorough, but we're human. We make mistakes. So if we missed anything or glossed over anything, please let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. Enjoy.
Welcome to Rivendell, Frodo Baggins.
Hello Wargamers, hobbyists, Tolkien enthusiasts and brushmasters. Welcome to the Lowlands Wargaming podcast. This podcast is about the hobby we all love, the Middle-earth strategy battle game as created by Games Workshop. The Lowlands Wargaming podcast is proudly hosted by and representing the Dutch Middle-earth community. Sit back, relax, and we hope you enjoy the show. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Lowlands Wargaming podcast. I'm so excited for today's episode, and of course joined as ever by Tim. Good evening, Tim.
Hey Kevin, good evening. How are you doing? I'm feeling just as excited.
Yeah, this is great. This is like the first official coverage of the new edition for us.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that we're here.
Oh yeah, so happy. Yeah, besides the leakages that were there, this is finally the first in-depth podcast about the new edition, and I'm very much here for it.
Yeah, exactly. So for a fewer transparency, today is T-minus 1 week for the release. So we're 1 week before the release of the new edition, but thanks to the, how shall we say, very widespread and ubiquitous leaks, we already have a pretty good picture of the new edition. And in fact, I got sent a full scan of the new rulebook by a source of mine, for which I was very grateful. And we decided to just get a head start on the coverage. And why wait on the full release if we already know pretty much everything?
Yeah, through the magic of the interwebs, we had insight into the new rulebook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are a few pages missing, but from the looks of it, none of those are very important. So there might be something that we're missing today. But in general, today we are going to cover the entire new rulebook. We're going to cover it from the perspective of a player that is already established. So if you're listening to this podcast let's say in a while from now and you're a new player and you just want to learn the rules, this is not the podcast for you, because we are going to be discussing only the changes compared to last edition. So this is everything you need to know if you are already well familiar with the Lord of the Rings rules and just want to know what's up, what has changed, what has stayed the same maybe. Well, we're not going to cover things that haven't been changed, I guess. So if we omit anything, you can just assume that's still the same as it was in the last edition.
Exactly, yeah. Maybe with a few exceptions here or there where we hoped there would be a major change, but yeah, more or less this is only all the changes. But I should underline that this actually really is all the changes that were made in the rule book, so not the army's books. We're not going to be covering profiles or such, but all the changes to the rule book and so to the new rules of the new edition of the game.
Yeah, exactly. And to give you an idea of the preparation that went to this, we got the leaks about a week ago. Exactly a week ago, actually. So it took us a week to go through everything and double check, triple check everything. In the lead up to the new edition, I actually had a bunch of sticky notes in an existing rulebook with things that I want GW to change, things I suspected they might change, and things that we already knew were changing based on the community articles. I'm happy to say that every single one of my sticky notes got touched. So I think my game sense is pretty spot on.
Yeah,
for
that was actually
figuring it out.
Pretty amazing that like all the sticky notes were treated in one way or another. Yeah.
So if you can't tell already by our enthusiasm, we're actually really excited about these core rule changes. Overall, they're good. Like our previous podcast was a little bit more salty because that was more covering like list building, Wargear, and the other things that have been changed. But when we're looking at just the pure core rule changes, overall my impression is pretty good. And hopefully at the end of this podcast, you'll figure out why.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, mine is as well. I think I'm about 99% happy with all the changes. Maybe like a slight exception here or there, but that's mostly due to rules being changed that I loved to use, dare I say, exploit. So that's a personal problem.
No more exploiting for you.
Nope.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll just dive straight into it, won't we? Oh, well, 1 second. I think it's important to note that I will be adding timestamps to this episode. So we're going to treat all the rules changes into chapters in chronological order with the chapter names that are also in the rulebook. And with each new chapter, I will add a timestamp in the description for you to reference later on if you're unsure about a certain change or rule from a certain aspect of the game. Let's say the move phase, you'll be able to skip more easily to that part of the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And for each section, we'll cover what has changed. And if there's something big that has changed, we'll discuss it a little bit. But if it's just something where it's like, okay, this has changed, cool, we'll just move on to try and keep it somewhat contained to a decent episode length. But I still suspect that we might be here for quite a while.
Yeah, we'll probably be here for a few hours, but that's okay.
That's all right. Good things are worth time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so now we can dive straight into it.
All right, let's do it. Basic principles. Okay, so first off, we have some very basic stuff. The profiles look a little bit different now. There's more stats, there's other representations. I think interesting here is the way keywords has changed. Now a model has both keywords, but also a faction that it belongs to. And also very nice is that a base size is now included for a model, which is very nice. Because previously we had to kind of like look it up on the store and look for the product description and see what it was supplied with. But in some profile cases, you actually didn't have that information, especially for profiles that didn't have a model, although those aren't or shouldn't really be around anymore. So that's nice. Overall, this looks pretty more clarified and specific.
Yeah, it's a nice streamline. Yeah, and I also like that they've separated the fight value and shoot value, so they are just in their own stat blocks right now.
Yeah, exactly. Also, intelligence, of course, is new. We'll dive into that more later, but that's a new stat. And finally, we notice the absence of heroic tiers, but those have been moved to army lists, which means that each hero can now be a different tier depending on which army list they are in. As an example, Boromir of the White Tower is a hero of legend in the Reclamation of Osgiliath, but in a regular old Minas Tirith list, he's a hero of valor. So that just changes how many troops they can lead and whether or not they get that sweet Hero of Legend Autopass Courage bonus, which is still around, by the way.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And I like this change. It makes for more flavorful army lists, I think. And the importance of a certain hero in a certain army list can differ, of course. So, yeah. That's good.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because they were already doing that in Legendary Legions. Sometimes they would say, like, this hero is a hero of legend if taken in his army. I think the Witch King of Angmar was a good example of it, where everywhere it was a hero of legend except in Barad-dûr. That was just kind of weird, so they kind of streamlined it this way, which is nice.
Yeah.
Moving on in the basic principles, we see that line of sight has remained the same. We will cover line of sight more when we get to the shooting phase. The keywords are now a little bit different, that it specifies that mounts and riders do not share their keywords anymore. This is a rollback from an earlier FAQ which specified that the entire model has a faction keyword. For example, Mordor Warg riders would also confer the Mordor keyword to their Warg, which would then keep the keyword after the rider was slain, and it could still benefit from the army bonus. So this is a rollback. This is no longer the case, and they are separate for the purposes of keywords and things like beast and other faction shenanigans. So that's, I think, positive overall. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of neutral on that.
Yeah.
I think this makes
same.
more sense. Because I really was annoyed at people playing Arnor and then saying that their mounts, the horses, would get, Malbeth saves, which was technically correct, but just thematically felt very wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that having an Angmar Warg Rider and the Warg not causing terror anymore is a bit weird, but I'm definitely willing to sacrifice that.
Yeah. And just to be clear, this already always was the case, except that the current rulebook, the one that's going to be old, specified an exception for faction keywords.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's now removed, basically, because that language is no longer there.
Yep.
There's also a clarification in here about choosing models and objectives. It specifies, and this was already always played this way, but it's nice that the language is now here, that when you choose things like this, it's always after deployment, and it is always open information unless specifically stated otherwise.
Yeah.
So things like Raza is, I think, secret information, but things like Master is open, and there was some discussion about the Shadow of Rudar, about whether that's open or hidden information or not. And this just makes it clear. Stuff like that, always open information unless the rule itself says it is chosen in secret.
Yeah, I'm happy about this rule. I always played it with the Shadow of Rudar that it was open after deployment, so I'm happy that I got it right. That's fine.
Yeah, and personally, I also played the same way. Like, if it doesn't specify secret, it's open. That kind of made sense, but it was never written down anywhere, so it's nice that they included it now.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, that's actually it for all of the super basics. Now we can go into the more nitty-gritty details of all of the phases of our beloved game.
Yeah, let's go.
Priority phase. So, short and sweet, there's only a few changes in the priority phase, and I think most people already know this one, but now when you win the priority roll, you get to determine who goes first, instead of you have to go first.
Yeah, this is a big change. Like, the changes might be short and sweet, but it is a big, sweet change, and I like it very much.
Yeah, it gives you more tactical nuance, although in most situations pretty obvious when you don't want priority, and it's usually before fighting has started, because be aware that this is priority for the whole turn. So if you give it away and then fighting happens, your opponent will have priority to determine the order of fights and potentially traps and stuff like that. So once the lines have clashed, you usually want priority. But there are a few models out there that gain bonuses when you give away priority, and then it becomes kind of a tactical choice. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it is important to underline that, like you mentioned, the player with priority can divide up fights, so that's something people need to be very aware of.
Yeah, so I was already playing with it in my head. It's like, okay, if there's a situation where both players are going to be calling heroic moves anyway, does it make sense to give away priority if on a flank you don't want to move first? And the answer to that question is yes, but only if not being able to choose the order of fights where, the brawl is already happening is not that much of a penalty. Like if it's a straight up shield wall versus shield wall with not that many traps yet, you can give it away so that you have an edge somewhere on the flank. But generally, you will still want to have priority when the fighting is happening.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Now, a quick side note here. Keep in mind that the tiebreaker for winning the priority roll in, any turn after the first turn is not who had priority last turn. It's who won the roll last turn. So the person who got to choose. So if you give away priority and the next turn it's a tie, your opponent gets to choose. It's not like you get to choose because you gave away priority and you therefore didn't have priority. So also the tiebreaker has changed, which is important to realize.
Yeah, good thing to know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also suspect a lot of people will forget this. So maybe using like some kind of token or whatever can be quite useful to keep track of this. Because usually priority is pretty much at top of mind, but who won the roll for priority is something you might forget by the time the new turn runs around.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay, well, that's it for priority. Let's move on to the move phase. Move phase. Okay, so there's a lot of cover here. The first thing is activations. So there's no language for what it's called when a model does a move, which was usually like a catch-all phrase for, being able to cast magical powers, having to test for courage tests, stand fast, heroic actions, stuff like that. So now it's more clearly defined that a model is officially activated when you start moving it. And it finishes activation once it's done moving, basically. And that language allows for more streamlined rules writing for other stuff that happens during, or happens at the end of an activation, basically.
Yeah, it's good for certain special rules and special effects. And like magic you could cast during your move, so it's less of an impact there. But I think just another good, important, streamlined thing that they implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm overall pretty happy with this one. Not really a massive impact on the game itself, but it's just nice to have more streamlined rules.
Yeah, exactly. It avoids discussion mostly. Like 90% of the time you didn't have any worries or discussion with this, but like once in a while you came across a game or a player that really had different interpretations, and this pretty much removes all kinds of disagreements in that move phase and certain special rules.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one, though, is quite significant. Control zone cheese has now been addressed.
Yay!
Which was like one of the top things on my wish list. So I'll just read out the official language. There's like a number of rules about charging opponents, and the last one says, a model that wishes to charge an enemy model that has lost its control zone may ignore the control zones of other enemy models that it would be impossible for them to charge. This only applies if they cannot charge the model due to the placement of other models making the charge impossible. So in other words, if you want to charge a model that has already been charged and therefore doesn't have a control zone, you can now do it even if your opponent has a spear support like half behind it and technically its control zone is overlapping yours, but there's no way for you to reach that spear support. Or, things like defending barriers and not being able to charge them, etc., etc. has also been addressed, which we'll get to in a minute. But overall, very happy with this.
Yeah. I think an important addition is that if a model has been charged and there was one of his friendly models that was like half an inch away but on the front line, so it was possible for you to charge the friendly model but you wanted to charge the model that had no control zone, then you're still obligated to charge the model with a control zone. So this only is for models that you cannot charge, which is, most often, the spear supports.
Yeah. Now, of course, it's also possible that you want to charge something and you just don't have enough movement range to get to the model with a control zone. In that case, you can also charge the thing without a control zone. And technically, with these rules, you can also use your own models to stop yourself from charging models with a control zone. So there is still a little bit of space for finagling. But overall, this is a lot better than what the current situation is.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And I have to say that I barely came across any of these shenanigans in the games that I have played as of yet, but I definitely heard of people that had some issues with it, so it's very positive that they cleared this up.
Yeah, for me, it pops up in like once every 2 or 3 tournaments, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
But like
yeah.
usually it was also like not consciously. Someone wasn't actively doing control zone cheese. It's just like through backing away in chaotic battle lines, you eventually end up in a situation where, oh yeah, there is a control zone here, and therefore I really aren't able to charge. But it's not like they did that on purpose. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So overall, this is very good.
Yeah. And along the same vein, jumping, leaping, climbing have also been changed a little bit. So jumping over a prone model or jumping over a gap, leaping, climbing, etc., etc. If you now roll a 2 to the 5, you can end up in a base contact with an enemy model and therefore charge it at the end of the climb, jump, move, etc.
Yeah. Oh, this is so much better.
Yeah, so this basically prevents people from just sitting behind a barrier or on top of a cliff and being like, yeah, you can only get on here if you roll a 6.
Exactly.
Which was stupid. There's some... we have to draw a little bit of attention to jumping over prone models because the language there is a little bit different. It says that if you roll 2 to 5, you do jump over the prone model, but you have to charge it. Oh no, sorry, you can choose to charge it or just stop on the other side of it, not charging it. And if you roll a 1, you have to charge it and you stay on the side you were originally on, so where you were trying to jump.
Yeah. And if you roll a 6, then you can proceed your move should you have any movement left.
Yeah, as normal, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's a small buff, I guess, for jumping over prone models. It gives you a little bit more flexibility. It's interesting interaction with terror, which we'll get to later. We'll keep that in the back of our heads for when we get to the terror section. Next up, pairing off of fights has been removed from this section and has been moved to the start of the fight phase, which is fantastic because a lot of things can happen in between the move phase and the fight phase, which then have an impact on pairing off fights. But then if we fast forward to the fight phase a little bit, over there it does say like, hey, sometimes you need to know which fight is which for the purposes of figuring out an in the way or magical powers or something along those lines. So if a situation comes up like that, then a player with priority quickly decides who is in combat with who at that point, rather than waiting until the fight phase.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But also this has impact on... Well, what I wanted to say was that I hardly ever did this in the move phase. I don't know how it's for you, but this always happened for me. Like the pairing off fights always happened at the start of the fight phase. Usually we called heroics, like for an heroic combat, this is important. So like, okay, this guy is in combat with who? For deciding an heroic combat. Oh, he's with these 2 people, these 2 models. Okay, fine, I'm calling a combat. So yeah, this is pretty much a positive change overall.
Yeah. So basically the language has changed to suit how it was played already. No one really split up combats at the end of the move phase. They all did it on the go during the fight phase whenever it mattered. So the language just kind of reflects how it was played.
Yeah. So which is very positive. So that shows that there actually are some people keeping track and ears on the community. That's nice.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. And finally, in the move phase, we have a little change in the reinforcements rule, which is quite nice. Previously, in Maelstrom and Reconnoiter, when you choose a point for your warband to come on, your entire warband has to come on from exactly that point. Now you choose a point, your hero comes on from that point, and then any other warriors can come on from within 3 inches of that point. So you're still not able to like move on an entire 6-inch wide shield wall in a straight line, but it does give you a little bit more flexibility in case like your opponent put you in a really awkward spot or whatever and you just don't have the space. You now have a little bit more flexibility to work with.
Yeah. Well, it's almost 6 inches, right? Because if you place a die on the edge of a board, it can other models can deploy either 3 inches left or 3 inches right from that die. So it is a line of 6 inches, but your hero still has to come on. So it's almost a 6-inch battle line.
Yeah, basically, you can fit that in technically. It's more but for like those really large warbands where you have like 15 model or 18 model shield walls or whatever. That doesn't fit.
Exactly.
But for the smaller ones, you could just move in, add a block, which is quite nice.
Yeah, and for bows it could be beneficial, but not always.
Yeah, it might make it so that you can move more archers half and get a shot off on the first turn. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a very minor change in the grand scheme of things. It's just kind of a quality of life change, I think. It's just nicer to move it on like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So good. It's a good thing. Positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it for the move phase.
Yep.
Let's move to the shoot phase. Shoot phase. Okay, so we alluded to it before. Line of sight, in the way. The rules for determining line of sight and in the ways have not significantly changed. The same principles apply. I think this is very relevant to mention because this was on my personal wish list that they did change.
Yeah, same for me.
And they have changed it somewhat because my main pet peeve is actually gone, which I'll get to in a minute. But the core thing is the same, and I really wish we would just start measuring from base to base rather than using true line of sight, because it's sometimes just a headache and it slows the game down a lot.
Yeah, especially if there were models or are models that are higher up that are shooting, like from a cliff. You usually have some discussion if you have like one model in the way to the person that you're shooting, or two models. I can see a head here. This is a second in the way. Ugh. It's a headache. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But then again, true line of sight is an argument for elevation, or the other way around. Elevation is an argument for true line of sight, because if you wouldn't use it, then technically you would get all the in the ways if you just draw a laser line and you hit all of the bases, whereas obviously you can shoot over some of those models. Maybe not all of them, but at least some of them.
Yeah, so that's fair. Like there's no perfect system for this, I think. But there definitely were situations where it provided a bit of discussion, and I'm guessing that still will be the case. Yeah, there's not a perfect change, but I would have preferred if they did try to change it at least.
Yeah, I think the Corvus Belly system of silhouettes is really nice, but it only works for a game where the model count is relatively low, because otherwise it becomes really chaotic. And it's also the entire scenery there is designed around it, so...
Exactly.
I think this is a system that we will have, and we'll never see it fundamentally change, but it has been improved somewhat.
Yeah, and there was also, I think, a bit in the book, but that's not new, that models that have been modeled on like certain higher bases for any benefits, for example, shooting, that you don't need to measure from the true line of sight of that model, but measure it from if the base wasn't hired or heightened, then measure it from the point there where the head would have been, which is also pretty, yeah.
That's hard to guess, right?
Exactly.
But that's not new. That's still, falls under the whole modeling for advantage clause.
Exactly.
That's not new language.
Yeah. No, that's the same as before.
So talking about in the ways, the in the way chart was obviously gone. This was announced before. All the in the way tests are now a 4+, regardless of whether it's a fortified window or a tall blade of grass. It's all a 4+ now.
Yeah.
And there's also been some language added about natural sixes always hitting. There was some discussion about this because there are now more rules that give you penalty for shooting, like the new shade of Angmar from the last supplement is such an example, which would technically make it impossible for orcs and goblins to hit anything because they got a -2 penalty.
Yeah.
And there was some discussion about whether that's like modifying the die roll or modifying their shoot value and blah blah blah. But now it's just obvious, if you roll a 6, you hit.
Exactly, yeah. I have a bit of a double feeling on the in the way chart being removed. On the one hand, I like it for the streamlining aspect, and it avoids any discussion. But on the other hand, I kind of don't like it, because it is a bit weird that you can have like a rock that half of your knee is standing behind, and it would provide the same difficulty as a like sort of a crenellation you're shooting from, let's say Helm's Deep, and you're in between two crenellations and you're shooting down, and it's both a 4+. It is a bit weird. It's less realistic. I mean, I understand it, and I don't have a huge issue with it, but I do think it's a bit weird.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you, but from a competitive standpoint, this is the only logical solution.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you will get really long arguments at every gaming table about, no, they should be like a 2+ in a way, because only his left pinky is being covered. And no, most of the models covered should be 5+ in a way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can imagine the discussion. So now it's a 4+. As long as there's something covering it, it's a 4+ for everything that is in the way, which is
exactly
fine.
Yeah, I totally understand, and it is fine. I wish there was some sort of way that there were a better system, but yeah, there basically is none. So we'll just have to deal with this.
Yeah. So the next bit is one of my favorite bits. It's not about something that was added, but something that was removed. There used to be some very verbose language in the rules manual about what happens if you're shooting at a large model and there are multiple possible shots that all have in-the-ways, but they have different amounts of in-the-ways or different kinds of in-the-ways. So you can imagine you might have a mortar troll that's like partially behind a house, and also his half that isn't behind the house is like 2 orcs in front of it. Now, obviously in the new rules, large target, that doesn't apply anymore, but you know, in the old edition, you could then have a discussion about, you know, is it going to hit the house, is it going to hit the orcs, like what in the way can you take? Because an arrow can only follow one path. It's not like it zigzags to hit as many in the ways as possible. So there was this whole paragraph about, you know, if you can't agree, then you have to roll off, and if your opponent wins and chooses the one that you didn't want, you can still change your mind and shoot at something different altogether if you don't like the shot anymore. And in practice, I have never seen this happen at a tournament, and no one has ever played it this way, but just the fact that it was in the rulebook has annoyed me to no end, because it's just such bad rules writing. It's so it's so verbose. It's so like it can take so much time to do shooting, because if you have to do it for every single shot, because then you technically get a roll off for every single shot, whereas normally you would roll all of those shots together. A shooting phase can suddenly take half an hour or something. You know, it's ridiculous. So all of that was removed, which I think in essence is an improvement, because it was stupid to begin with. But now it doesn't give any guidance on what to do in situations where, I don't know, you have 3 Mirkwood elves in front of Thranduil and Elk on his left side, and on his right side there's 2 elves in the way and a dwarf. And then you can have a discussion about which path the shot should take, because, you know, they're both equal. Or maybe, you know, there's only 2 elves on one of the sides, and then of course the shooting player is like, nah, I only have 2 in the way, so I can shoot at his front, and there's only 2. There's no more language covering what to do.
I mean, I understand, because, like you said, I think I never had any discussion on this. I tend to give the player who is being shot at, give that player the benefit of the doubt. So if he is saying, yeah, no, there's definitely a third in the way because of, like, there's a head and an arm here, I'm like, oh man, fine, dude, that's cool. I always want to have a nice, cordial game and have no discussions. Maybe like in 1 or 2 of the games that I had on the tournament, I had a bit of discussion on it, but then we just rolled off, and we'll just decide, okay, on a 1 to a 3, there are 3 in the ways, and on a 4 to a 6, there are 2, and we'll pretty much get it covered all the time in that manner.
Yeah. So in essence, I don't think anything really changes because of this.
Yeah.
But it's a symptom of the true line of sight system, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Rather than just using lasers and bases.
Yep.
Because that's deterministic, and then there's usually no discussion. So yeah, that's just a side effect of it. Yeah. Anyways, I think I've said my piece. Time to move on to the next bit, because there is more about the shoot phase. There is a added section about shooting behind friends, which works the same as before. But now, if you're shooting behind a friend, and that friend is touching a barrier or a terrain piece or something along those lines, you can now ignore that terrain piece or barrier just as if you would if you were touching it yourself. So we used to already be able to look around trees and over, you know, ledges when you're shooting down at someone from a moonbug or something along those lines. And now you can also do that if you are touching a friend, so the front rank usually, and shooting through them, as it were. You can also now ignore that terrain piece.
Yeah, I really like this actually, because this is something that did come into effect in quite a lot of my games. And usually I was the person that was saying, don't forget to take an in the way test, because you're not base contact with the barrier, so it's an in the way. And that did provide some discussion sometimes, and I'm glad that this clears that up.
Yeah, so like usually if it was low walls or something, even the background could look over it. but it came up if there were like tall fences or things like that, or windows or stuff like that. It came up quite a bit. So
Yeah.
it's nice now. I actually had this come up in a game against Dirk like 2 years ago or something, where he had a bunch of archers in a tower and shooting down, and obviously the back rank would then have an in away from the tower because the floor and fence and whatever started obstructing the shots. So that's no longer the case now. So this is a positive change, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and finally, in the shooting section, there is now a change in language for when you shoot into a combat. On a 4+, you still hit your intended target. On a 1 to a 3, you still hit a friendly model. But now it says it's the closest model to the shooter that has line of sight. That it has line of sight to.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah, so I've already asked this in the international Discord, and it's been added to the unofficial FAQ list. What happens if you shoot into a combat where you have no line of sight on any of the friendly models? You can imagine a troll fighting some dwarves, and the dwarves are behind the corner of a building from the perspective of the shooter. Do you now get to shoot into a friendly combat just because there's no possible way to hit a friendly?
Yeah. I really don't know the answer of this.
Yeah, I mean, no one does, because the language is different and there's no guidance given on what to do in a situation like that. So previously it was just the closest target period, and then you technically could hit a model that you would never even have line of sight to. But I think that situation is preferable to what it is written like now, because this just gives me a whole bunch of questions. I don't think this will come up that often, but the larger a model is, the more likely this is to happen. When we start thinking about mortar trolls and stuff like that, like massive models that could be fighting something behind a piece of scenery, but their whole butt is still sticking out. Yeah, then of course you're going to get shots where the friendlies aren't visible.
Mm-hmm, exactly, yeah. And I think this is so easy clearing. It is so easy clearing this up. I mean, just remove the and within line of sight part, and it's dealt with. It's gone.
Yeah, but they specifically added that, so that's a conscious change that they made.
Yeah, so I'd be very interested to see on what their view on this is.
Yeah, like I don't mind the change because, it's kind of weird that you could technically shoot something through a building, but then at least offer guidance on what you're supposed to do in a situation like that.
Yeah.
Because I personally think it would be really cool that if you manage to manufacture a situation where it's literally impossible for you to hit your friends, then Good can even shoot into combats if there's no risk of hitting a friend. I think that would be pretty cool.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, because there are certain parts in the rulebook that state that being in combat is not a static thing. I mean, the models represent being in combat with each other by just touching bases and staying still. But in an actual combat, nobody is standing still on one certain point of the field that they're fighting on. Like they're switching sides. In the case in where you're fighting trolls, there are even scenes in movies where they crawl under the legs or in between the legs of the trolls and try and get his back. So my feeling is that it would be better and more representative if they just deleted the within line of sight part and just hit the closest friendly model, period.
Yeah, so basically keep it the way it was.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, I'd be fine with that too. Either way works for me. I just want guidance, because right now I hate anything that's not specified, if that wasn't obvious to the listener already. I do not like ending up in discussions, especially at tournament top tables, because it's a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah.
And it usually draws the attention away from what matters, and that's good generalmanship and just list building and playing the game properly. But sometimes these things really, really matter. Yeah, and that's when people start arguing rules and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah, and fair enough, but I wish that we wouldn't have to. But maybe that will be FAQ'd soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the list for submission, so maybe we'll get an answer as early as February. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, let's hope so. Yeah.
Anyways, that's it for the shoot phase. Now we're going to get into the fight phase. Fight phase. Okay, so like we mentioned earlier, the pairing off of combats has been moved to here. Nothing really changes. It's still done by the player of priority, and if it becomes relevant before the fight phase due to shooting or magic or stuff along those lines, then it will be done ad hoc by the player with priority at that moment for the comments where it matters.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty clear on how you need to proceed with this. So, yeah.
So I think that's fine. The first thing of note, and this is a trend that I've seen throughout also the army bonuses and other things, it seems like, and this is not 100% clear, but it seems like you can no longer use banner rerolls and other rerolls if you're not losing. So the language says, gives some guidance on like the order of operations for rerolling and spending might and stuff like that. And it seems to imply that you can no longer use banner rolls to, on purpose lose a combat. And this is actually a trick that I did quite a bit for trying to break myself or trying to back away to an objective and things like that. So it seems like that has changed and you can no longer do it. And along the same vein, I've seen some other rules changes where you may reroll to strike and other stuff like that. Those have all changed to must. So it seems like rules like this have been changed to making more sense, where a model of course would try to win their fight and of course would try to kill their opponent if they're fighting. Yeah, like
I definitely agree with you that I think you can no longer try and lose a combat if you're winning. I mean, for me, the rules on that are pretty clear, but I'm hoping that no other people read this in a different way.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's a fine change. I'm not going to mourn the loss of it. It was a trick in the toolbox that was kind of cute to use, and it came in clutch on a few occasions. But if it's no longer possible, that's fine. That's fair. I will. Yeah,
it was kind of gamey, kind of try hard. So that's
absolutely, 100%. Yeah, but if there's a rule for it, I'm going to use it if I can get advantage out of it, right?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on. There is some new language about what being engaged in combat means. And it's clarified basically to say spear supports don't count, which is not a change. We already knew this. For rules like animosity and anything about being outnumbered and stuff like that, spear supports never counted to begin with. This is now, the language has been changed a little bit, but fundamentally this is not really a change, just a wording change, which is fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What has changed though is defending barriers. And that has changed significantly.
Yeah, this is big.
Yeah, so before, when you defended a barrier or a doorway or a elevated position, you had a control zone that emanated out from the position you were defending. And if you were then charged from the other side of the thing that you were defending, that control zone stayed on. So if you were defending a small wall, you could still hold that wall even if you were charged, and other enemies could also charge you. And you would end up fighting like multiple enemies supported by multiple spears. And then the second thing that happened is those fights will all become 1v1s. So that removed the advantage for the opponents that charged you. And you basically had one model of yours fighting multiple times in a row, provided they didn't get killed or lost before. What hasn't changed is like backing away and stuff. So if you lose but you don't die, you still hold your position. So that hasn't changed. But what has changed is if you get charged your control zone, it's gone. It's now turned off as normal, which means that if you have a lone model, defending a small wall, if it gets charged, the next person can just jump right next to it over the wall. And, thinking back to the change in the move phase on a 2 to 5, they can even charge that model now on, their side of the wall. So the defensibility of barriers with a low amount of models has been significantly reduced.
Yeah, and I like this. I mean, this is very much more in the spirit of how it would go in an actual combat situation. So that is more accurately represented on the tabletop is only a good thing. So yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so this is mostly for tournament play, I'd say, because in narrative games, you usually are defending the whole wall anyways with models. And doorways, of course, are small enough that this doesn't impact those at all. But in tournament games, you would occasionally see people where they would put their army in a bottleneck, and then there was a small wall next to that bottleneck, and they would have like a handful of models holding that. Yeah. And that was enough. And now that's no longer enough. You need to actually, cover it properly. Yeah. And not leave space for the opponent to jump over it, basically. I will say though that like they're still strong. Like you still get the benefit of the opponent needing 4 pluses to first hit past the barrier and then do a wound roll on you. And if you don't die, they have to back away rather than you backing away. So they're still strong.
Yeah, it's still good. So just to clarify, let's say there are 2 people defending a barrier and they're spaced like half an inch apart. You charge 1 model. Can then a second enemy model try to jump over the wall and charge the person from the other side, or are you're still charging into a control zone? So I'm guessing you have to charge the other person half an inch away from the other model first, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And half an inch wouldn't be enough space for you to jump over, anyways.
Yeah. So that's still, you can still do that.
Yeah. No, you can't force yourself in between enemy models if they haven't like left you space to do so. So that hasn't changed. And also, like even if they were a full inch apart, so there was technically space for you to go over, that model on the side still has a control zone and still defending a barrier. So you have to charge it on the other side of the barrier so that they are defending it. But then if you have a third model of your own lying around, that one could then try and make a jump test to scale the wall and charge one of the 2 in that space that was left over.
Yeah, so you'd still have to be, after the jump, you'd still have to be in base contact with the wall in order to successfully perform a jump at all.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay.
Okay. I will say that we are missing a few pages in this section. Like the rulebook that we have doesn't cover everything. So there might be something that we're missing here, but it doesn't seem like we're missing anything important because all of the major rules that we would expect, we have seen.
Yeah, probably some clarifications or exemplary situations that you often see, but still, a little bit of a disclaimer.
Yeah, or some stuff specific to sieges or things like that.
Yeah.
Courage and intelligence. So the big change here is not much of a change, actually. The characteristic has been changed from like Courage 3 to Courage 7+, which basically just means now you can see the number that you need to roll on your 2 dice.
Yeah. That's it.
Yep. Yeah. So you don't need to do math anymore, like, Courage 3, so I need to get to 10. So, I need to roll a 7. Now it just says, no, it's 7+.
Yeah, which is better. Yeah, just more streamlining. I think it's interesting that some models that hit on your courage do have to do extra math right now, but it's still the reverse situation, and that is cool because the reverse situation didn't happen that often, as opposed to taking other courage tests. So yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. So basically Blades of the Dead works as it did, but now you have to do the reverse math. So if you're striking at a Courage 7 model, you have to do a 10 minus 7, that's 3, so that's then the defense value that you're hitting at with Blades of the Dead.
Yeah. I actually saw a few people online asking that, am I now hitting on the defense 7 model? And I have to admit I did a bit of a facepalm.
Yeah. But I guess they just hadn't seen the new rule for Blades of the Dead yet. Yeah. Speaking of Blades of the Dead, the Harbinger and Warhorn rules seem to imply that they are now a bonus to the roll rather than a change, like a modifier to their characteristic. So they simply give a -1 and a +1 to the roll, respectively. Now this doesn't change much in practice, but there are 2 situations where this could be relevant. First, for Blades of the Dead, Harbinger no longer stacks with it, and Warhorns no longer protect against it, which is both a buff and a nerf at the same time.
Man, I'm crying big fat Angmar tears right now.
Yeah, you can suck it.
I mean, to be fair, we still have no clue on how Angmar works in the new edition, so maybe the terror is just gone completely, because it has vanished from like a lot of profiles, but that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, feels bad, man.
Yeah, but like a lot of Warhorns are also floating around now, and those don't buff against Blades of the Dead, so it works both ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but I didn't encounter Warhorns all that often. But I mean, it is what it is.
You will probably see more of them in this edition because of the changes, and like Boromir's horn now counts as a Warhorn, so you're just going to see more of them in general.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep.
Okay. So in terms of intelligence, there's not really much relevant to cover here. It works the same way as courage. It's just a separate stat and is used for things like passing tests for the ring and throwing people at other people with hurl. Have we seen it confirmed for other stuff?
Yeah, digging up objectives, I think.
Yeah. A Spectre now has Fell Light Within them test on intelligence.
Yeah.
So that's another example. And I think Sentinels probably have a similar thing. Have you seen a Sentinel profile yet?
No, not yet. No, there aren't any Sentinels as of yet in the army books. I'm hoping. I'm pretty sure that they'll come back in the armies of Middle Earth, but not yet.
Yeah, so probably armies. Yeah, I mean they weren't going to Legacy, so they should be in there.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, I think that's it for Courage and Intelligence. No massive changes here. It still works quite well. Stand Fast works the same way it used to do. It now just has language about activations. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited to see on where intelligence tests are going to be applied. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see if it's going to be relevant for enough scenarios that actually list building to take at least one model with high intelligence in your army is worth it.
Yeah, I'm
like
hoping
an example
it is.
in Besiegers of the Hornburg or Usurpers of Edoras, we have General Targ, the guy on the giant horse with the giant sword. Targ! He is pretty shit. Like, I'm not gonna lie, his profile is pretty mediocre for the point costs, so I'm not inclined to take him to anything. But his intelligence is 4+, which is really fucking good. So if intelligence suddenly becomes very valid for, a number of scenarios, it might actually be worth it to include the guy.
Yeah, true. If you can recall, on a previous podcast, on a preview we did, I made a guess that intelligence would have some interactions with magic. Looks like I was definitely wrong, because from what I can see yet, there's no interactions or almost no interactions with magic at all with intelligence. So I think that's a shame.
Yeah, so from what we have seen so far, the interactions with intelligence in general are pretty low.
Yeah, not a lot of interactions there. So I'm hoping there'll be more examples to be had soon.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, as far as we know, you cannot use will points to influence a intelligence roll. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And this can be relevant. So it's not like Courage where you can use will to influence it. In this case, it's just how smart are you? There's no will to be used.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a thing. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Unit types. So these aren't really new necessarily, but they're now more official or more expanded, as it were. We had keywords previously, and the system has basically been changed a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's more streamlining.
Yeah, more official, which is good. So let's go through the types. Of course, we have things like infantry, cavalry, etc. We now also have a mount type, a monster type, of course. There's also war beasts and chariots. We have siege engines, heroes, warriors, uniques, beasts, swarms, and elites. So there's a few in here that are new. Those are mostly the ones at the end there. So let's go through them one by one. Yep. We have unique as a type, which is new but not new in concept. It's the rule of one. Basically, as long as something is named, this is the previous of like named wargear and named characters, you can only include one of those in your army.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there is an example that you can also not take like a Gandalf the Grey and a Gandalf the White in one army list, which totally makes sense. And I don't think anybody played it that way, but it's just another good clarification.
Interestingly, though, I wonder how necessarily this was, because now army building is different anyways, and you don't have these duplicate options available to you anyway. So
exactly, yeah.
It's nice that it now has official language, but do we really need it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of examples there are some examples where you could, in theory, take two of a certain wargear in one army list still, if it wasn't clarified, but I mean, use common sense here.
So maybe like there's an army list that's called Road to Rivendell, and you can take Arwen there and have Frodo as a passenger. Maybe it's possible to also have Glorfindel in there to represent the book version when Armies of Middle-earth gets released. And then obviously both of them can have Asphalov, and then you have some conflict there.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
You have the same thing of Orcrist with Legolas and Thorin, where they can't both have it. And they can be in the same list in some situations. Like, I think Battle of 5 Armies, they can both be in there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was the example I was thinking of, so, yep.
Yeah, okay, so that's all right. The next keyword is my personal favorite and has been on my wish list for a long time. It's the beast keyword.
Yay!
Yay, we now actually have language for animals, which is great, because animals can't hold shit. Which is basically what this beast keyword means.
Yeah,
which is nice.
They lack
opposable thumbs.
Yeah.
So, swarms is something else, but like birds and spiders and wolves, etc., they cannot pick up Wargear like banners, and they cannot carry or be passed objectives. So no more digging up an objective with a bird and then flying away from it with it and insta winning the game.
Yes.
I love it. It makes it
fat one, Guahir.
I mean, suck a fat one, Gullivar.
Yeah, true.
Mr. Angmar player.
I mean, let's be honest here. If you look at the model, Gullivar does have opposable thumbs. So
That's true, actually. But I think in the fly rule also specifies you cannot use it to carry things, right?
Yeah, it is. But there is an argument to be made here. I need to defend my Gullivar.
Fair enough. Anyways, I already mentioned it, but swarms are now a thing. So I think these are Bat Swarms and Crabane and maybe Brootlings. No, wait, the Spider Queen was Legacied. Although I can see them giving her Brootlings the swarm keyword because she is obviously going to get a Legacy rules update, right? But
Sure.
Basically a swarm just cannot be prone and it cannot be trapped.
Yeah,
because
fair enough.
It's like a flock of things. I mean, that's cool. It's kind of a buff for Crabane and Bat Swarms.
Yeah, one thing I love to do was like have a Dead Marsh Spectre do a courage test on a Bat Swarm, fly it over behind my lines and just swarm it.
And trap it.
Yeah, exactly. So
you can't trap it anymore, but if you do that, you probably still...
Yeah, probably.
You just need to commit a little bit more to make sure that you do. And finally, we have Elite, which I feel thematically is nice. I love this. From a list building perspective, it's sometimes really annoying. The Elite basically means that model cannot be taken in an army list unless you bring a hero that has the leader ability for that Elite. So as an example, Denethor has the leader Fountain Court Guard, which means that Fountain Court Guard has the Elite keyword, and they cannot be taken unless you have a hero like Denethor in your army, and then they can only be in that warband.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. And we actually had some discussion on previous podcasts on what needed to be done about like those elite warrior spams, and I think we had a few different theories, but this definitely wasn't one of them. But I'm happily surprised. I think this is a really good rule.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I'm kind of sad for my Fountain Court Guard because I have 18 of them that are beautiful, but you know, they got hit with the nerf ban anyways because they can't take shields anymore. So whatever, it doesn't matter.
And your Black Numenorians probably.
Oh, yeah, we'll see.
I mean, definitely, they definitely will have the elite keyword, right?
I really wonder like what they're going to look like and which list they're going to end up, because they could just be relegated to Corsairs, because Umbar is a Numenorian descendant city, basically.
I'm going to do another prediction, and I think they'll still be in Mordor, but I'll think only Black Numenorian marshals and maybe the Mouth of Sauron will be able to lead them.
Yeah. From a list building perspective, that makes sense. I think from a lore perspective, I could see them only in Barad-dûr and in Corsairs lists.
Yeah, also fair enough. Yeah, I can understand that as well. Yeah.
Although I have no idea who would lead them in the Corsairs list, so if they are elite, so.
Yep.
Anyways, I think this is fine.
Yeah,
That's
agree.
Good. Okay. That's it for unit types. Nice and quick. On to a big one. Cavalry. So, there's lots of changes in the Cavalry section. They are all relatively minor, but they're mostly just clarifications, and overall I'm really happy with what I'm seeing in here. So let's just kick it right off and go into using the stats from either profile. Small change, but it says it must use the stats from the mount if the mount stats are better than the riders, and like vice versa, I suppose. Which is nice because you can no longer try to like fail your courage on purpose or use weaker strength for your strikes if you don't actually want to kill something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of an example here, but I'm thinking of like warg riders that had like if they wanted to kill themselves, they'll use the attack and the strength of the model on top, and they'll try to stab or something like that. It's pretty ridiculous, but yeah, you can no longer do that.
Yeah, or like, if you have a Wraith on a Fell Beast and you actually don't want to kill something because you just don't want to quarter your opponent just yet, you can use Strength 4 instead of Strength 6.
Yeah.
That's quite relevant, right? So
definitely
that's no longer possible. So, kind of like the things that we discussed earlier where you can no longer use rerolls to lose on purpose. It just kind of goes in that line.
Exactly, yeah. Which is cool and fair enough, so yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also a nice little clarification in here that says if you must charge, which is a rule for like Theodred and some other models, if you are mounted, you do not have to dismount if that's the only way that you could charge. You are now just considered not able to charge if you cannot charge while remaining mounted, basically. So it was already played this way by most people, but it was always open for discussion, and some rules Nazis would be like, no, you must charge because you could charge if you dismount, blah, blah, blah. And that's now just don't be that way. And it's now clarified in the rules that it's in fact not that way, which is nice.
Yeah, I actually did hear this pop up like once in a while, so I mean, this is a really good clarification, and I really agree with the clarification as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Another minor change is that the height of the cavalry model has now changed. It used to be that you had to use the height of the mount, and now it says you use the height of the full model. And this is relevant for stuff like fall damage, for jumping over barriers, for ascending, climbing, and stuff like that. It's actually for just generally elevation play and barrier play, it's a huge buff for cavalry.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. Just for jumping over things or being to move over things unencumbered. So like small elevations, they're just able to move right over instead of, is this above or below the knees of my horse? Yeah, it's this is weird.
Yeah, I will say that if a table has walls and they're quite low, but high enough that they are defensible barriers, and cavalry can just instantly move over them because they're now taller than it. It does feel a little bit weird. But at least the defending a barrier thing counts the height of the defender rather than the height of the... No, actually, that's not wrong. It counts the height of the attacker. So, yeah, you could be defending a barrier and then some giant dude on an elk runs up and then you're suddenly no longer defending a barrier.
Yeah.
Because the elk big.
Yeah, that's Friendul stocks going up again.
Stonks, yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. So minor change, but I think in gameplay it won't have too big of a difference, but it's actually quite significant in a lot of like niche situations.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking about niche situations, this is something I spotted and that I actually was pretty proud of, because usually I am not focused on details as much as you are. But there's a little bit of a contradiction, because there's a part or a rule that says once a rider has been separated from their mount, they cannot remount again ever. Well, there is a new Rohan army list that does exactly this. They can remount on a different horse. So, I mean, you can have a discussion on what remounting means if it is the same exact horse, but I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. So the Ride to Helm's Deep is that list, and it's actually another funny side note for that list. You can take Hama in that list, but because Hama was never released with a horse, he is actually on foot in that list. So you could start the game with a Hama in base contact with a Rider of Rohan, and then on the first turn, give Hama the horse of the Rider of Rohan, and then have a mounted Hama in your list anyway, which you would then have to convert a model for yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, which is totally against what GW was going for with this new edition.
Exactly, but like
Yeah.
it doesn't specify that it has to be a hero that starts the game on horse to begin with. So you can just do that on turn 1 and have a super cheap hero on a horse, because all of the other heroes pay 20 points for their horse. But then you can have a Rider of Rohan for, I think, 14 points or 15 points or something.
Yeah.
I think they're 14.
Something like that.
So not only does he get a 14-point horse, but then you also get a free infantry model on top of it. So talk about bargain.
Yeah, it's a really big part. And in my mind, I just imagine Hama mounting a horse and is riding off, and he's like, "Eat shit, Grimbold," and he's just riding off. That's just really funny to me.
Anyway, that was a good tangent. Not super relevant, but very fun.
Funny, yeah.
Not so fun is the following change. This is the one I don't like, and basically nobody likes. Your dismounts now have to be GW accurate. So they have to accurately depict the Wargear option or choice of the model. And if that means that you don't have a legal dismount, for example, Rivendell Knights and Riders of Rohan, they have bows and axes and shields and maybe even throwing spears, all the stuff. You now pick a model that represents that, so a infantry model of Rohan or a high elf, and it basically drops the other Wargear. So you can choose whether it keeps the bow or the sword and shield, basically.
Yep, exactly, yeah. Yeah, that's annoying.
Yeah. And there's also some debate because Mirkwood Cavalry and Iron Hills don't get accurate dismount models.
It's funny you should say that, but because actually, as of today, I ordered some 3D prints of Mirkwood elves without a shield to depict the dismounts.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, this is just Games Workshop taking the piss at this point. Like, I get that, the business decision, and I do agree that in the end, it's better for the game if everything that you can play is actually purchasable and has an official model. It won't stop anyone from using 3D prints if, they're nicer than 20-year-old sculpts. So,
Yeah.
But this is just taking the piss at this point.
It is. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. I mean,
So there's a small silver lining for Rohan players and Rivendell players. You now get to keep your higher defense because you dropped your bow, and you lost expert rider, but you also lost the bow. So now at least you're still defense 6 and 5 respectively.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and sometimes it's so weird because it's so random. Because sometimes they do get to keep like throwing spears. So,
Yeah, because there's a model for it.
Exactly.
You can just have an infantry Rohan warrior with throwing spears. But
Yeah.
the Warg riders with throwing spears don't get to keep them because there are no orcs
Yeah, it's so
with
weird.
throwing spears
Yeah.
on foot. So yeah, fun times.
Yep.
I don't think there's anything else really different in here. The throne rider chart is the same. There's a list of mounts, just giving all of their stats. So armored horses, regular horses, etc. So there's no changes here. But what is interesting to note is that Fel wargs have intelligence 7+, and normal wargs have intelligence 8+. So it seems like Fel wargs are slightly smarter than their normal counterparts.
Yeah, I really wonder if this is gonna have any effect at all. Like, okay, I guess, fine. They're a bit smarter. Cool, man.
Yeah, it might matter in
Yeah.
some situations. It's not like they can dig up a objective.
Exactly,
because they're
yeah.
a beast.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was gonna say that. Yeah, they can't dig up anything.
Yeah, it's fine. Let's see. Oh, I do really like this one. Breaking limit has been changed for cavalry. So it used to be that a slain cavalry model would only count towards the break point if the entire model was slain. So in the case of Warg riders, you had to kill both the rider and the mount if the mount decided to stick around. And in case of Warg marauders, it was especially painful because you would have to kill all 4 models in order to advance one on the break track.
Yep.
And that was actually the whole army concept of a player that I encountered in Belfast, where they ran assault on Lothlorien with like 7 Warg marauders or something like that. So they were really hard to break.
Yeah, huge army.
Huge. Now, if you kill the rider, the entire model is considered slain for the purposes of breakpoint, and killing the mount will not have any effect towards breakpoint.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So just kill the rider, don't care about the mount. I think this is a good clarification. Or not clarification, change. This is a good change. It's nice.
Yeah, it is.
It basically saves you from all of the headache of doing the admin.
Yeah.
Like, oh, how many full cavalry models have I actually killed, right? No, it's just how many riders have you killed.
Yeah, and this is mostly applied to Warg Riders, but I think it's a very positive change.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that like armies that have loads of Warg Riders are easier to break now. And I think Jelle has been playing heavy Warg armies recently and kind of using that hard break limit as well. So that's a bit of a nerf for that style of army.
Yeah. Yep, it is.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, and speaking about barriers, we mentioned them earlier. There's a small other change there. Cavalry do get their lance bonus now when they charge a defended barrier, but they still don't get the extra attack or knockdown. But like we mentioned earlier, there might be quite a few situations where the cavalry just ignores the barrier to begin with because they're just taller.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it's positive, right? It makes sense that you still get to use a lance because you're still charging up. You still have a lance in hand. It didn't make any much sense that they couldn't use it. So, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I'm still not sure if I like the height change for cavalry.
Yeah, this is.
I think it could actually invalidate barrier play a lot against cavalry armies, and I'm not sure if that's healthy.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think this is one of those cases that we'll just have to wait and see on how much impact it has in practice. But in theory, I fully agree with you.
Heroes. So this is a big one. Heroes are very important to MESBG. I would say probably more important than ever because of general changes, balance changes, which we'll partially get into in this podcast and partially we'll cover when we cover the army lists and the profile changes.
Yeah.
Now, let's kick things off with a 2-for-1, which is if you have 2 heroes in one profile or even 3 heroes in one profile, which is now possible, they get to share resources. So, for example, Azog and the White Warg, they already had a rule that they could share resources, and now that rule has basically been turned into a general rule for all models that have a mount with resources and they have resources themselves. They can now share those resources, which means that Shadowfax can give its fate to Gandalf and its will for resisting. The only thing it can't do is give its will to Gandalf for casting. So that's the only exception. You cannot use the will from a mount to make casting rules for magical powers. This also applies to passengers, which is in a different section. I'm just fast forwarding to that a little bit, but I figured it's relevant to mention that here. So passengers are also in here more now. So there's Pippin with Gandalf. Merry already was able to ride with Eowyn. There's a list where Gimli can ride with Legolas. Am I missing anything?
Don't.
Oh yeah,
think
Frodo
so.
with Arwen on the ride to Rivendell. That's also one.
Yeah.
So in all of those instances, the rider and the passenger get to share resources. The only thing that hasn't been mentioned is whether the mount and the passenger also share resources. So in the case of Gandalf with Pippin and Shadowfax, does Shadowfax get to use Pippin's fate? As written right now, no. You could, maybe it'll pop up in the FAQ. We'll see.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that's pretty good.
I think one question I immediately had was if Gandalf can use the fate of Shadowfax. If I'm not mistaken, Gandalf has like that one of the rings that provides him fate rerolls, right?
Correct.
So if Gandalf uses a fate of Shadowfax, can he still use his own special rule, and can he reroll that fate point?
Let's see. I would say yes. It doesn't have the specific language of saying as if it was their own. It just says they share their pool. But it's not like Shadowfax is rolling for Gandalf.
Yeah.
So I would say yes, but not the other way around. So like if Shadowfax is using Gandalf's fate, because he now has basically Super Horse Lord kind of. I wouldn't say that Shadowfax gets the reroll.
I probably will agree with you there. Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, but that's an interesting one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think overall this is quite nice. I like this. It's a buff for Gandalf, which is honestly the only model that this hits. Yeah, it does say that hero mounts with a characteristic of attack of 0 will still run. So Shadowfax is still going to be gone by the time, if Gandalf dismounts or whatever. So you better use those resources before you dismount or get shot, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. So it does provide a better argument for trying to save Shadowfax his wounds. So if he gets shot, definitely use a might or fate. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because he still has will left. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. On the subject of resources, the might section has updated and expanded its list of stuff that you can use might on.
Yeah, quite a bit actually.
Yeah, so there is an interesting omission here. The shooting has changed. It now says that you can only use it to improve a to-hit roll. Wounding is a separate thing, so you obviously still can use it to wound. But it doesn't mention in the way anymore. And the previous version did, so this specifically has been modified to remove in the way.
Yeah, interesting.
Don't know why, honestly, but it's just a thing. You can no longer use might to pass an in the way roll.
I think I think I know why. Because rolling an in the way test, let's say for instance, someone shoots a bow. Once you have loosed that arrow, there is no physical way for that person at all to influence where that arrow is going. So it would be kind of weird that if you loose an arrow and you would shoot a house, that you certainly try and focus really hard and you feel very heroic suddenly, and then the arrow changes its course. That would be weird. So I think it's just
by the same logic, you shouldn't be able to use might to adjust wound rolls for shooting.
But yeah, okay, yeah, fair.
This is one of those things where you just shouldn't try to logic it too hard, and it's just more like, what made them think in terms of game balance this was necessary? Because no one really was using might on in the way tests anyways, other than trying to hit the mount, but you weren't allowed to use might to reduce your roll anyway, and the mount was always on 1 to 3, so that also didn't apply.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I was feeling really proud of myself for a moment there, but then you made a very concise observation that you cannot alter, or that you can alter to wound roll, so yeah, I don't have any more to say.
Yeah, it's just weird. I don't think it'll have any impact on the game whatsoever. It just kind of stood out to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it now specifies that you can only use might for special rules if the special rule thing specifically says that might can be used to alter that roll. That was already the case, but now it has been kind of clarified. But this one is one that you spotted, I think.
Yeah, I'm proud once again.
Yeah, so might can be used to improve the result of a casting or resist test when using will points.
Yeah, so that means that you can no longer use might to alter the resist roll if it comes from the resistance to magic special rule, for instance.
Or Fortify Spirit, or whatever it's called.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it's pretty big. I think that's a big deal.
You know what it could also mean for your Witch King lovers, Saruman lovers, Gandalf lovers out there? You can no longer use might on the die that you get for free.
Interesting.
When you're casting.
Yeah, that really depends on the wording of the special rule, right? If it says as if a will point is being used.
Oh yeah, it does. It does actually. Yeah, those special rules now have all been changed. I didn't include in the document because I felt like it wasn't relevant. But all the rules that give you free resources for the turn basically say you now gain a might point or a will point or whatever, and if you haven't used it by the end of the turn,
it's gone.
It's lost.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
So it still counts as spending it. So then in this case, yes, Gandalf and Saruman, etc. can still use might on that roll, which I think is good, because it wouldn't make a lot of sense if they couldn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'll just delete this part. Probably won't, but yeah.
What do you mean?
in the edit.
Oh no, I think it's fine. Like people can hear us figure things out.
Yeah, I was joking. Yeah, it's fine.
Delete this. Yeah, I think this is fine. I guess.
Yeah.
It's a small nerf to resistant magic, but overall magic has been nerfed, so I think it's fine.
Oh man, this had such a big effect on the Belgium GT I went to last week. It came into effect like in one game where it was really hugely important. I won't get into it, but I'm happy this got changed.
Yeah. Speaking of changes, hero combat has not changed except one thing. If you now end up in a situation where both heroes in a combat have both called it hero combat, it doesn't matter whose combat goes first, whoever wins, and if they manage to kill the opponent, they get to do their hero combat. Previously, if you, for example, had a really cheap captain getting charged by an Omega hero, and the Omega hero was like, ha, I eat this hero for breakfast, I'll hero combat off of it. And then the captain was like, well, I have a white point left, I guess I'll try and call a hero combat. If you win the roll-off and the captain's combat goes first, even if he dies, then it was his combat, and therefore the enemy hero could no longer do their slingshot thing, which was stupid.
It was so filthy.
It was really good, but stupid.
Yeah, I definitely surprised one or two people here and there in tournaments with this thing, and it's pretty good that it got changed because it was gamey as hell.
Yeah, I had someone use it against me, I think a year or two ago, and it was the first time I learned of it. Because it had never come up before then, and I'd never thought of it myself, or bothered to like read that to double check how it worked, because I don't know, it didn't make a lot of sense to me that it worked that way, but here we are, and it has now been changed.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I'm glad.
Yeah. Another good change, I think, is Heroic Resolve.
Yeah, definitely.
So Heroic Resolve used to be the thing that you only really used if you were against like an obnoxious amount of spellcasting, because it meant that the hero that called it could no longer move.
Yep.
And that was a pretty big penalty. Now, the hero that calls it can move. Yay!
Yay!
It still does the same thing. It gives the bonus resist dice to everything within 6 inches. But additionally, a hero that calls Heroic Resolve automatically passes their courage test for breaking. And even does so when they get charged, and still provides a stand fast if they get charged.
Yeah, this is huge.
This is massive.
Yeah.
This is in some situations like game winning. If you have a low courage army, but you have a hero with Heroic Resolve and some might points left, you don't care losing priority anymore. Will just basically make your army melt. You can call that resolve, and even if like your opponent wins the heroic move roll off or what have you, you now still get this, which is nice. One thing of note is that if the hero gets transfixed, it does get turned off.
Yeah.
So they still have to be able to quote unquote activate, even though they got charged. The language even says they get to activate, even though they normally wouldn't, but they only get to activate to do their stand fast, basically. So they are considered to have activated for the purposes of that.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit wordy, but it means that you can still cancel with a transfix if you get to move first. So, I don't know. It's niche, but, they also call it resolve, so they have resist against your transfix. So it's...
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Anyways, heroic accuracy got a very, very small change. The hero that calls accuracy now also gains the sharpshooter special rule if they didn't have it already. And the sharpshooter special rule allows them to choose mount or rider when they hit a cavalry model. They still have to make in the weight test as normal for everything else, but they can decide to specifically target the mount or the rider, and then they don't have to roll for it when they hit the cavalry model.
Yeah. So is this only for hero models that get the sharpshooter special rule?
Yeah, the hero that calls it gets a sharpshooter special rule.
Okay, yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, so no bubble effect or something like that.
No, the bubble effect is for re-rolling in the ways.
Yep.
Which is the same as it is right now.
All right. Yep, fair enough.
I think this is fair. This is a small buff, but...
I mean, I would...
Because most models with accuracy already have sharpshooter. At least a lot of them do.
Yeah, and I would have loved to have accuracy being implemented more. So, like, giving everybody sharpshooter would be pretty cool, actually. I'd have no problem with that.
That would be devastating as cavalry armies, though.
True, but then again, then you suddenly would see people calling heroic accuracy, and nowadays you never see it.
Yeah, but I think that would be absolutely devastating as cavalry armies. So, to the point where it would maybe single-handedly remove cavalry armies from the game. not just because people will take accuracy just for it, but because they just happen to have a hero with accuracy and enough bows for it to matter.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep.
Because, Legolas is a thing, and Legolas is in a lot of armies. And Legolas is strong this edition, so that by itself could just invalidate.
True. Yeah, that's
capitalists.
True. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Anyways, good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is, and again, a big change, which fits because it was another heroic that was barely used.
Oh, I
it's
love it.
Heroic Challenge.
Yes, we'll finally see it on the tabletop.
And I think we'll see it quite often, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
It's pretty good now. So, Heroic Challenge now works. You can nominate a hero within 6 inches, so you no longer have to already be fighting the hero.
Mm-hmm.
It still has to be of the same tier or higher than you, unless you have an exception for that. And this opponent still gets to choose whether or not to accept the challenge. So basically what happens, you will always get +1 attack and +1 to wound if you are fighting the target. And only to wound that specific target. Like, you don't get the +1 to wound other models in the combat.
Yeah.
If the target is slain, you get a mind point back.
Exactly. I know a certain model that is going to love this.
I know a lot of models that are going to love this.
Well, I was thinking one in particular, and that's one you have already fielded, which is an old King of Gondor, Eärnur.
Oh, Eärnur, yeah. I mean, Eärnur is going to challenge everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Because
you get a challenge.
can.
You get a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he is probably like a poster boy for this heroic, but so is Wolf, the new Dunland dude, also gets a special rule with it in the Besiegers of the Hornburg list. Anyways, there's a second half to this, because the person that got challenged, the hero that got challenged, gets to choose to accept or decline.
Yeah.
If they decline, nothing else happens. They can move away, they don't lose their heroics, blah, blah, blah. They don't get any penalties as far as I saw, although now I'm second guessing myself, so I'm going to double check in a minute. Okay, so we just double checked, and they did in fact remove the language about not being able to call stand fast and with me's and stuff like that if you decline a challenge. So the penalties are no longer there, but you also don't get any of the benefits. So if you accept a heroic challenge, you now also will get +1 attack and +1 to wound on the person that is targeting you.
Yeah.
But it also means that the two of you must charge each other if able. So then you really get this duel to the death. And the language that other models are not allowed to help has also been removed. So it is possible to declare a heroic challenge, they accept, you fight each other, and then you just swarm them with some extra dudes. So you do have to be a little bit careful here.
Ooh, interesting. I think this is a thing that people are going to get mistaken a few times, I think.
Yeah, especially like early doors.
Yeah.
If they're used to the old edition. It's been changed so much that it's in such a way it's easy to assume that some parts of the old stuff still apply, but in fact they don't. It's been completely overhauled.
Yeah. This is really important. Yeah.
I think in most cases, if you expect that you're going to end up fighting each other, you should just accept, because then at least you get the +1 attack and +1 to wound yourself as well. But if it's something that you're obviously going to lose, you should just decline and then run away and put as many models between you and that person, and they still have lost a might point for it, right? So that's the big thing. They do get a might point back if they kill you, but if they don't kill you, they still lost a might point to declare the challenge, and you don't get any benefits until they fight you, because the +1 attack and +1 to wound is only if they're in combat with you.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a question that came up here for me, and I was wondering, if you activate other models first and like put a shield or a wall in between the two heroes, so that one of the hero or the person who got challenged cannot charge anymore, can he still do his own thing? Can you do that? Because you can still choose to activate him later on in your movement phase and just put some dudes in between, or choose to charge the guy who declared and just do your own thing with that hero and try and murder some dudes first and then come back for the challenge.
Yeah, no, it says they have to do it if able.
Yeah, okay. So this is something people need to look out for.
Yeah. But then again, like, you're not getting any benefit from the challenge until you're actually fighting the person that issued or accepted the challenge.
Yeah, so it's probably better, like you said, to accept, because you can I'll just put models in between us until I'm ready to fight that guy, and you'll just fight that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So, interesting. I think good stuff. We can actually see it come up now.
Oh,
Because
definitely.
in a lot of situations, especially with strike being changed, which we'll get to in a minute, this might now actually be the better option when you're fighting another big hero, because one attack is more reliable for winning fights than having a higher fight, because ultimately if you roll higher than your opponent, that's better, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So
yeah.
a challenge could actually be more beneficial. Okay. Heroic defense has not been changed. This is exactly the same as before. I'm only mentioning it because it's the only thing in here that hasn't changed.
Yep.
Other than heroic move, I think.
Yeah, no, hero move was the same. Yep.
And combat is also the same. So strength, combat, move are the same. Sorry, not strength, defense. Strength has been changed. Sorry. So strength has been changed the big way. It used to be never used because it was only like plus D3 strength or something and was never relevant. Now it doubles your strength to a maximum of 10, which is crazy.
Yeah, this is insanely good. Yeah, I really love this change because it was so damn unreliable first, and this is crazy. Yeah, this is an awesome change.
Yeah, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that a Forlong the Fat on the charge calling heroic strength will wound Sauron and the Balrog on 3s.
I mean, there are a lot of models that can use this example if they, for instance, can two-hand, if they have like hand and a half weapons. These guys can go insane. Yeah.
I mean, if you have similar heroes with a lance or a two-hander and some kind of armulus bonus giving them +1 or hatred or whatever, you could feasibly wound stuff on 2s. Or even like auto wound.
Yeah. I mean, awesome, I guess. I think that's cool and still applies to real life situations as well, probably. So,
yeah, this is nuts. I can now see situations where you use strength.
Yeah.
It will still be rare because you will first need to win the fight, and there might be strikes involved and stuff like that. Because it's a might point to increase your chances to wound, but you're spending the might point before knowing whether you're going to win the fight to begin with.
This is mostly applicable for like monsters who don't have any heroic stats, so like trolls or something like that, who have high defense values, and you can just charge them with like a Glorfindu who already outfights them, and you put a bunch of elves in them as well, and then you'll go ham. But yeah, something like that.
Yeah, or you get like 2 heroes charged into one of those nutty high defense dwarves or whatever, and you're like, this dude really needs to die now, and then one of them calls strength and the other one can like strike or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of strike, and this is the big one.
Ooh, I love this.
This is the biggest one. Strike has now been changed to increasing your fight value by D3 rather than D6.
Oh man, this is a single line in our document, and this is one of the biggest positive changes overall for the whole game, period.
I agree with you, but I will put an asterisk in there, which we'll get to in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, so previously you would have these things where you have a fight 4 or fight 5 hero with strike that could realistically just threaten the likes of Gil-galad or Gwaihir or Elisar or Bolg or whatever. There was a pretty decent chance that if that monster or hero was out of might, then that cheapo hero would just win because they roll a 4 on their strike and now suddenly they're fight 8.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was kind of nuts.
Yeah, it
now
felt
that's not possible anymore. Like a fight 4 hero will never get higher fight than a fight 7 hero.
Yeah.
Even if they max roll their strike, and very likely to get lower. Also, striking against a hero that has 1 higher fight than you have a third of a chance to just tie them instead of getting higher fight than them if they don't strike back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really like this. Like, it makes it so that high fight and usually high value heroes get a lot of more chances to shine in the game. So if you charge a fight 7 model, especially if they also have some advantages like elven weapons, and you yourself are a fight 5 model, even if the elf hero doesn't decide to counter-strike, there's only a 33% chance you're outfighting them if you call a strike. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's
No, I agree.
Man.
It makes high fight heroes much more robust as well.
Yeah.
Like the likes of Wargear don't have to burn their might anymore just because some random Fight 5 hero decided to call a strike against them.
Yeah, I mean, let's not go into Wargear because he's an insane monster in this new edition. But
we will get into Wargear because this is where that asterisk of mine comes in.
Oh, okay.
I like this change, but I am concerned. And that is because they have also increased the power level of a lot of the good heroes. Like LSR is Fight 7 now and has extra resistant magic and other stuff and is the same points. Boromir has gotten +1 to wound on the charge, and in some lists he can share his resources with Faramir. Legolas has gotten buffs to his shooting into combat and some other shenanigans. Gwaiir got an extra attack for his efforts, and no nerfs, still the same points, and even got a dominant special. I think the only nerf he got is, I think he might have the beast keyword now, so he can't pick up stuff.
Yeah, he did.
Don't quote me on this, I haven't double checked that. And magic has been nerfed, like overall, like Compel is removed. Channeling is gone, even though channeling was hardly ever used, which we'll get to in a second.
Compel actually wasn't removed, but part of the effects were removed.
Yeah, sorry. So Compel no longer transfixes you after
exactly
doing it. And like casters in general got hit with the nerf. Ring Wraiths are harder to build around because they have fixed points values, etc., etc. So my concern is, although I like this change at face value, my concern is that Fight 7, Fight 8 heroes are going to determine the meta, and there's very little that people can use to stop them other than other Fight 7, 8, 9 heroes that may or may not have access to strike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think partly this is how it was intended by GW, because they wanted to give like the big movie names more of a place to shine and more of a place in the game. Because before, people tend not to bring LSR or Elendil or other such names because they were overcosted for what they did and too risky to take them. And now they definitely have a place in the game. But on the other hand, you might get situations like you just mentioned, where if you don't have an army that has access to at least a Fight 7 hero, you might get swamped and killed pretty fast.
Yeah. So the tools to deal with big stuff have gotten weaker. Magic is the main one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Swarming them and picking them off is another. That's still the same for the most part, but you see that a lot of these heroes have some trick up their sleeve that also let them deal with it in some manner. Like Legolas can shoot into the combat and take a few off, and LSR of course has the returning might points. Gwaiir got an extra attack, so is less likely to whiff on the rolls.
Yeah.
So just to give a few examples.
Mm-hmm.
And shooting into combat hasn't necessarily been nerfed by off itself, but with the new throwing weapon limit, which we'll also get into in a minute, and like the massive nerf to just Corsairs in general and other shooting lists not being in here, that's also not really a thing anymore. Like maybe Assault and Helm's Deep will do it, but I don't know many lists that will have their primary method of dealing with big beatsticks is just shooting into the combat, killing their own guys, and eventually killing the enemy hero.
Yeah.
So we could live in a world where a simple list like, I don't know, Corsairs, or another list that doesn't have access to big heroes but has just lots of troops and some nifty stuff with them, just won't see play because they just get absolutely murdered by the likes of LSR and Gwaiir.
Yeah, that would be a huge meta shift. Huge.
Yes. And like you mentioned, I agree that it wasn't desirable that we didn't see those big heroes that often, because Lord of the Rings ultimately is about heroes doing fantastic stuff.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Legolas skateboarding down Helm's Deep and shooting 3 orc high and then decapitating another one. That's the stuff that the movies and the books are made of.
Yeah.
And it's possible that we end up in a meta where that is what we see, and then the warriors are just there as a backdrop and as dudes to be killed by these big heroes. And then eventually whoever has the bigger hero kills the other person's hero and then wins the game.
Yeah, I suddenly had this mental picture of a tournament where you have 10 skateboarding Legolases going around.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Could be a...
Honestly, with how that profile is, I can definitely see like half a tournament having a Legolas in a list.
Oh,
and there's still a lot of lists where Legolas can be taken, so it doesn't mean that you could still have a lot of variety of lists, but just a lot of Legolases.
Yeah, I'm already looking at some Mirkwood elves ready to be painted up.
Yeah. There's also a section about will and fate. These have not changed. Will cannot be used for intelligence. We already covered that. So will and fate are still the same. It's just the heroic actions all got massive changes.
Yep.
Slightly concerned about the strike change. I love the strike change, just to be clear, but I think Games Workshop might have just changed a little bit too many things at the same time, and we'll have to find out what the new meta is going to look like.
Oh yeah, definitely some things will be reworked once again or rolled back or something like that. But I think that's normal for such a big shift in rules.
Yeah, but normally we don't see like erratas on like the core rules themselves, and they don't really change until a new edition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, true. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see how this works out.
Well, let's move on to some big stuff. Monsters. So the monster section has a few changes. We all expected it because non-hero monsters were relatively unplayable in the current edition.
Yeah.
And they have gotten better.
Much better.
Yes. Not extremely better, but in some cases like the Mortar Troll, they got better and they also had the points reduced. So I think between the two of those, they might actually be playable now.
Yeah.
Not extremely good, but playable, which is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's just dive into it. Starting off, when the monster makes strikes after winning a combat, and just normal strikes, not rend or stuff like that, and they kill a model, they may now also make a free strike against any model that was supporting that model.
Yeah, this is really big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can no longer like tag a monster with one model and then just give it a spear support anyway because it's, risk free. Like that spear support is very likely to die as well.
Exactly, yeah, and that's what you did against monsters, right? You charged it with one or maybe two models, and in the case where you had access to pikes, you could put like 4 pikes in it as well. Suddenly, the monster could only kill 2 models, but you could throw 6 die against the monster, and just hunt for a 6, and now you're in deep trouble if the monster rolls a 6.
Yeah, so on the subject of pikes, this does mean that the monster can make strikes at both pikes with the way it's phrased, if they kill the model that was being supported. Mm-hmm. So that's the big if, right? You do still need to kill the first one to get those free strikes against supports.
Yeah.
But in theory, if your monster kills all 3 pike-wielding models in base contact, you can also make strikes at all 6 pikes behind them. So you could, in theory, kill 9 models with your monster.
Oh, wow. I'm waiting for the time where this happens.
I'm not, because I'm probably the person that it happens to, because I tend to play Eastlings.
Yeah, true. We'll have to set up a game where I'll just run like 3 or 4 Mortar Trolls, because I do have them painted up, and see what happens.
I have 2 on blisters, on spruce, sorry. So I could make 2 of them. Mm-hmm. Anyways, Barge has been changed. Barge is now D3 plus 3 inches instead of D6, so it's now 4 to 6 instead of 1 to 6 inches, which is good.
Love it.
Barge has been changed. The language has been changed to now also affect spear supports, which it used to kind of not really. And the monster's controller can now choose direction and order for spear supports. And if any make ways need to be made, then also the monster's controller chooses whether or not that happens, and the direction that they happen to, and it's still 3 inches. So now if you're barging against a pike block, you not only barge the touching model, you barge both supports and potentially models behind them that then have to make way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, this is all in the spirit of what Barge was intended to be, I think. So, yeah, positive change.
Yeah, no, it's actually a lot more effective now. Monsters are now going to be really hard to stop from getting to an objective. If they really want to just barge every turn and then fight something, they actually will slowly wade through your army
Yeah.
But then again, if they do that and they end up without support, they're still prone to whiffing. Like, that hasn't changed. They haven't gotten stuff like, rerolls against infantry or something like that people were speculating about.
Mm-hmm.
So they are still likely to lose their combat and then just die if, half your army is fighting it.
Yeah.
But now, at least you can't do that without risk, because it can also hit supports. But it doesn't get infinite strikes against support like Sauron does. But it's something, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is major Birder and the Boys stonks, right?
Yeah, but also think Mordor trolls and cave trolls and stuff like that.
Well,
They like this.
Sure, but I meant specifically because Birder's boys do get banner rerolls from Birder, so
Yes.
that's why. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think Mordor trolls specifically are a very good example of benefiting from this, because they're also fight 7.
Yeah.
So on a 6, they do win against pretty much everyone except big-ass heroes.
Definitely, yeah.
So they can now they are intimidating. Whereas you used to see a Mordor troll was like, ha! And then defeated a warrior a turn, basically. And now it's like, you can't really do that anymore.
Yeah, and they were so easily changed or countered with magic, and that also changed a bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, mostly because the compel doesn't also transfix them.
Exactly, yep.
Yeah, they still can get transfixed. So it's like they're still weak to magic because they don't have stats and stuff. They didn't get any innate magic resistance. That's also something people were speculating about. It's just like the core monster stuff has been improved.
Yeah, so this is a good change, but not a huge change. So they were a bit careful on this, but I definitely like it.
Yeah, I think their approach was healthy, because buffing the core things too much would then again swing it more in favor of hero monsters. Coming back to Gwaiir also benefits from this.
Yep, definitely, yeah.
So making that even better would have been just Gwaiir overload.
Yeah, we're going to see him a lot, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of core monster things, another core monster thing is hurling.
Yep.
That has also changed a lot. It's still the same distance, so you still roll a d3 and add strength difference, but you no longer draw a line. You choose a target within range. So a target enemy model that you want to throw it at, and basically you have to imagine it's like a mini siege engine. So like you throw it with an arc. You don't hit anything in between, you just hit that model and its entire combat, if it's in combat, which is good. But you can only get the throw at that specific model if you pass an intelligence test. If you fail, then basically it's kind of like a scatter where your opponent chooses one of their own models within range. It could even be one completely on the other side of a troll that's doing the throw. Basically, they weren't smart enough to throw it at the important thing, and now they're just angry and throwing the dwarf at another dwarf over at the side instead of at Durin, or dismounting Dane, whatever what you're trying to do. So the hurled model, so the one that's flying through the air, takes 2 strength 6 hits. If it's cavalry, it's both on the mount and the rider, which I think only matters for Warg riders and other mounts that don't instantly run away, because they go prone. So you do get dismounted guaranteed. The target is also prone if they are strength 5 or lower, and takes a single strength 6 hit, and is also not flying if it's cavalry, and of course the hit is on both the mount and the rider if it's cavalry, etc., etc. So it's still really good against cavalry, but it's no longer good against all the cavalry. It's good against one cavalry in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I was also thinking of fell beasts, but those have strength 6, I believe, so they won't be knocked prone.
Yes, basically all monster stuff is strength 6 or higher.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Yeah. And an interesting side note is that you can still hurl if there's no legal targets, but then you're hurling at a point on the battlefield that is within range. So let's say, I don't know, Gwaiir is fighting a hero on their own, and they just don't want to kill the hero for some reason. They just want to throw it away. There probably is reasons for this. Probably some objective play or whatever.
Could you for instance, hurl a model like on top of a tower?
Oh god.
Yep, there we go. So if you have like an Osgiliath ruins that have 2 stories, and you're like, I think I'll hurl you on top of those ruins, and you'll have 3 turns of movement before you get back to the battle line.
It only says choose a point on the battlefield it can draw line of sight to.
Oh my god!
So you can't draw line of sight to the top of a building because you can't see it unless you yourself are taller than it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So there are definitely going to be some discussions had on this subject.
Yeah. Okay, so people, if you are listening, don't be that person. just don't abuse this, because you can only do this if there's no legal target in your range anyways, right? So how likely is it that whatever difference you roll, so it's D3 plus strength difference, most monsters are strength 6, so it's usually 3 inches plus D3, so there's almost always another enemy model within that distance.
Yeah.
So it's not going to come up that much.
I mean, I was thinking of roofs that have flat parts where a model can fit on.
Yeah.
This is going to be such an issue.
Yeah, I don't know. Lastly, about hurl, you can no longer hurl and participate in hero combat in the same turn.
That's a shame. I would have loved that would still be a thing, because there's a much bigger risk of not winning the combat, because you get a lot less hits on the model you're hurling, and that's the one that you need to kill in order for an heroic combat to go off. So a lot of heroes can survive 2 strength 6 hits. So it's a much bigger risk to call a heroic combat now. I mean, even a defense 7 model that gets 2 strength 6 hits, you still need to roll a 5.
Yeah, but I think they add it for the other way around. So if you first do a hero combat with Wargear, for example, and then fight someone else and then hurl to dismount yet another model.
Yeah, fair enough.
It would be almost impossible to position against that.
True, yeah.
Because Wargear also has pretty good intelligence, is likely to pass the test. So if Wargear first combats, slingshots all the way 12 inches over, then fights someone else, and then hurls something another 6 inches over, and then just snipes that and dismounts it, it could even be a hero that gets hurled and dismounted somewhere else, and suddenly is in front of another hero. It becomes a bit silly.
Yeah, it's too strong, yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably for the best that they stipulate this.
Yeah, agreed. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Let's move on to even bigger things.
Yeah.
War beasts.
Okay, War Beasts is my jam because I love great beasts. They're going to Legacy. Don't at me. I hate it.
Go off.
Let's talk about War Beasts. There's quite a few changes here. They're mostly quite positive and clarifications. So, the pivot rule has been slightly changed in wording. It is now specifying that you have to pivot by the shortest route. You could previously do a 350-degree no-scope and then go in your chosen direction, which sometimes was relevant if you wanted to push yourself away from a terrain piece in a slightly different angle than you would if you rotated the other way.
Yeah.
I have done this, so I guess I was abusing it.
With me,
so that's no longer possible. Yeah, I did it against you. I've done it in tournaments a lot as well, because you could. That's just kind of how you had to do it if you didn't have any other models around to stop it. If you didn't want to move the full 8 towards something, you kind of had to use a terrain piece to break yourself, but then it could really limit your movement.
Yeah.
So I am in favor of this change, but it does make it slightly harder to play with a War Beast.
Yep.
The next up is difficult terrain. War Beasts are no longer affected by it, which is massive, because it used to be that War Beasts have a really big base, and if you enter a very small patch of rubble or whatever, you are slowed all the way until the end of your base has passed through it, which basically means 2, maybe even 3 turns of movement sometimes.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Nuts.
Yep. Yeah.
So massive change, but War Beasts are now just no longer allowed to enter woodland. Period.
Yeah, that's
which is strange.
The downside and pretty weird. Yeah.
But I guess that's just because woodland has trees, and trees are taller than 2 inches, so you can't do that anyways. So
yeah, but then again, for such a large model, their trees are also pretty fragile. So
yeah. So this is, I guess, just to stop discussions like that.
Exactly.
And so it's they have to have some sort of weakness, and the weakness is now just terrain that people can be inside of, like buildings and forests. So it gives people a place to hide.
Fair enough.
And I guess that's fine.
Yeah.
The whole rules surrounding impacting terrain with defense has been removed. Now it just says that you stop if you encounter terrain taller than 2 inches. You still get the 3 strength 8 hits if you hit another War Beast, though. So you do trample damage on each other, which is fine. So this removes the whole FAQ thing that I had to do at every tournament organizer, are you going to have terrain on your tournament with defense values and wound values? And if so, what happens when they get destroyed? And usually they would say no, and then the war beast would just stop its movement at the terrain piece. So this is kind of how it turned out anyways, because that rule was a bit silly.
Exactly. So this is another thing where people were mostly playing it that way already, and this is just more streamlining.
Yeah, exactly. It also avoids discussions and stuff.
Yep.
Now, a buff for the war beast is that they can now still trample, and trample is just what their movement is called now. So whenever a war beast moves, it tramples. It's now still possible if they have been charged, as long as the combined strength value of the models that charged them is lower than the strength of the war beast itself.
Okay, so but the trample damage only happens when you activate the war beast, is that right?
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
All right, yeah.
So let's say you charge a war beast with 2 warriors of -3. That's not good enough, because it's lower than the strength of the Mumak. So the Mumak can still activate, and then it starts movement, and it starts movement by inflicting trample damage on both those warriors of -3. And then if they die, then it keeps on moving, and or it can pivot actually first, and then move and hit stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So the pivoting and moving straight line stuff, that hasn't changed. It still works the same way. Another big change is that you can no longer trample, as in deal trample damage, when you get on the board from Maelstrom, or I guess Reconnoiter, technically. So that's pretty big. So it used to be that if you were playing Maelstrom and your opponent had a war beast, you didn't want to have priority, because then they could just maybe wipe out part of your warband on the first turn. Now they just have to move on somewhere, make sure they don't touch an enemy when moving on that turn, and then the turn after that they can go nuts.
Yeah, which is fair enough, right? Because you don't want to be deciding whole games on move 1 and on an off roll or roll of chance. Half your army gets destroyed. Feels bad, man. Yeah, absolutely. You can no longer choose to not trample friendlies. It used to be possible that when you touched a friendly model, you could decide whether you wanted to try and kill them and keep moving, or just stop your movement. That whole language has been removed, which means that you just deal trample damage to friendlies now as well. So you can no longer use like a Serpent Rider or whatever as a guide for your Mumak to make it move 4 inches instead of 8 if you don't want to get into charge range yet and stuff like that. That's no longer possible. I think this is positive because it did feel a bit silly, but it's a significant nerf because it gives you much less control over where your beast is ending up. Yeah, I mean, it's a good change, and it's fair enough, because if you're choosing to get a huge elephant and you just want to step on shit, then you're not gonna have like a single Serpent Rider or Orc. Come on now, Mr. Elephant, this way. No, stop here. You can't move here. Okay, move a little bit to the left. It's just weird. So yeah, positive change.
Yeah. So next up, a very minor thing: you can no longer blast models out of the Howdah. It used to be possible in like a 4+ of a Source's Blast or something that models would just fly out of the Howdah and just fucking die. Which was pretty bad if it was the commander. Yeah. So that's no longer possible, which I think is good.
Yeah, that's good.
They now just go prone in spot, and they still take the damage, which is fine. Transfixing the commander no longer stops the War Beast from activating. It will still activate, but then the commander is no longer able to steer it, which means you don't get the pivot. So then you go in a straight line, and you have to activate. You don't get to choose not to activate the War Beast. So transfix is still relevant if you want to force the War Beast to go in a different direction. Then you can totally do that.
Yeah. I mean, this is good, right? It's just in the spirit of how that would actually happen. So yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, but the thing is, there are a few things that aren't specified here. So let's say you have a Spectre and you do a Fell Light Within.
Yeah.
Does that work? It doesn't say whether or not it works and who you have to target in this instance.
Yeah.
Also, Compel is not mentioned at all. Can you still compel the commander and move the War Beast as if it's your own?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Oh no, wait. So a war beast is completely immune to any magical power that would prevent it from activating, moving its full move value, or that would attempt to move it. So I guess it is immune to compel, but a Spectre is not a magical power.
Yeah, it's a special rule.
Yeah, so that's still a question then.
Yep. FAQ that SOBE.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Exactly. So in terms of shooting, nothing has changed. The siege notably still auto scatters to the beast from the Howdah. which used to be a really big issue for the Great Beast of Gorgoroth, because it was specified as a battlefield target.
Yeah.
And then if you shot at anything inside the Howdah, it would scatter the beast, potentially wound the beast, and insta-kill it without needing a scatter roll, which was nuts. But now that still happens, but it doesn't matter as much anymore because the Mumak, its Howdah, as well as the... No, sorry, I should say the other way around. Siege engine section specifies that war beasts and their Howdahs are now just siege targets, period.
Okay, yeah, so those rules are all gone then.
Yeah, so it means that the Great Beast of Gorgoroth is also going to be a siege target.
Yep.
Which is fine. I'm happy with that, because like that siege was always a worry for me. I'm going to pretend that Legacy is going to be fine and the Great Beast is still playable.
Yeah, well, that's a really big question mark there still.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another big change. Kills made by the War Beast in combat are now attributed to the commander.
Ooh.
This is massive for Contest of Champions.
Yeah. When it gets introduced again.
Yes. Because in this book it's not there,
Yeah.
but it's coming back. Don't worry.
You don't know for sure.
Yeah. However, the commander can still not use their might in the combat. It hasn't changed. It's still the war beast doing the fighting, not the commander. It's just if you happen to kill something in combat, it's attributed to the commander. And I think this is specifically made so that, I don't know, a Mumak army can still win Contest of Champions.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. There's been a change to the Stampede rules, a few actually. One that I'm really happy with, it now specifies exactly when it happens. So if you take a wound from the Mumak and you fail the courage test, either from the commander's courage or because if it was transfixed on the beast courage itself, you have to stampede the following turn.
Yeah.
Stampede now happens during the activation phase of the player who owns the war beast, but it has to happen before any of their other models.
Yeah, fair enough. Because otherwise you could just move out of the way all your other models and then let it stampede.
Yeah. But it used to be sometimes debated that it happened during the activation phase of the other player, if they had priority or something.
Yeah.
And they could choose when and stuff like that. So now it's just very clear when it happens. Additionally, if your war beast during a stampede hits a piece of terrain and stops, it does take 3 strength 8 hits. So we're back again. But now it's only during a stampede, which makes sense, right? Because like the first is a controlled stop because the beast is not like enraged or anything. It's like, oh, there's something I can't go through, better stop. And the other one's like angry and running around and hurt and smashing into things.
Yeah, it's in a frenzy, so it makes sense. Yeah.
Stampede can still make it run off the board as normal, and the same rules for going off the board apply, where only a piece of the base needs to be off the board for it to be just gone. So do be careful around board edges with your Mumaks.
Yeah. Okay.
I think overall, pretty good changes. It solves pretty much everything of War Beasts that people were struggling with.
It sounds like it. Yeah, I don't have that much experience with them, but yeah, it seemed like good changes.
Yeah, and some things like, if you take wounds for Stampede tests, you still have to take multiple courage tests, and it's an exception to like having to take multiple tests during turn. It's always played that way, it just wasn't stated that way specifically, and now it explicitly states that way. So there's a few clarifications in here that I haven't really mentioned, but overall it's nice.
Yeah,
I like it.
Awesome.
Chariots. So let's talk about Chariots.
Yeah, only for a short bit.
Yeah, so Chariots didn't used to have their own section in rules. Now they do. I read through it. Nothing significantly has changed in the Chariot rules in terms of how they were played. Lots of clarifications and stuff like that. We decided not to spend any time on Chariots.
Yeah.
Just to prevent this from going on even longer.
Exactly, and they're so corner case, though, right? I mean, the only Chariots in the game officially right now is, I think, the Iron Hills one, is it?
Correct.
Yeah.
So if this is relevant to you, or you're worried about facing an Iron Hills Chariot, go read the chapter, because technically it's all new. Even though in practice it's mostly the same from how Chariots were already played. It's just the rules used to be described in like their respective rule books.
Exactly, yeah. So it's good that they clarified the stuff, but it's nothing shocking.
Yeah, it's mostly works the same.
Yep.
Like it inherits some of the rules from War Beasts where they have to move their full... Oh, no, they don't have to move full, but it's like, when it activates and stuff like that. Weapons and Wargear. Okay, so weapons and Wargear. There's a lot of stuff in here to cover. A lot of stuff that's relatively minor. Of course, we already knew that special trikes were going away, which I've been asking for years, basically. So super happy with that.
Yeah, it was announced pretty early on, so...
Yeah. I'm really happy with it because it slowed the game down and didn't really add a lot, except people would just X swap everything.
Yeah.
So that's now gone, which is probably for the best. The only thing that annoys me is that even though they got rid of the special strikes, now like 50% of the armies have some sort of special rule that allows them to reroll once.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really big pet peeve of mine and a lot of other players I know. Like online, you read about it a lot, and people don't really like it. It's so unoriginal, and basically, like half of the army still get fainting without the penalty of halving your fight value or getting down to D3. So it's weird. It feels bad.
Yeah, and like part of the reason why I want special strikes removed was to like accelerate the game, because they slowed it down a lot. And now we still reroll once a lot, and it still slows down the game. And also, it doesn't make the army bonus of people that had rerolling once unique anymore, and now everyone has it, so it's still not a unique.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's still just as common as someone having a sword.
Yeah,
basically. So. Yeah, I don't really like having all that re-rolling once to wound around.
Yeah, agreed. Next up, we have two-handed weapons. They got a massive change.
Oh yeah, huge buff.
Listeners are probably familiar with things like Knight of the White Tower and the Clansman that used to have like a special rule where if they rolled a 6 with their two-handed weapon, it would stay a 6. And now all of the two-handed weapons have that.
Yeah. Oh, this is so big. I mean, you can go hunting for 6s with elves right now, and elves suddenly gain, like, massive killing power.
Yeah. So this is especially relevant for combats with... The more dice you have in a combat, the more relevant this is.
Exactly.
Because at some point, it's all about that 6. So then it doesn't matter anymore if you start having penalties on, like, a two-hander here or there, because you're just hunting for a 6.
Yeah.
But on 1v1s or like 1v1s with spear supports, the penalty still matters, because that 5 might turn into a 4, and that might be the reason why you lose, because your opponent rolled a 5.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm also thinking of like big heroes that have like hand and a half weapons. If a big hero is on an mount and it charges and it has 4 dice, if you're charging like 2 enemy warrior models or something like that, or a monster, or not something that has a lot of or a huge amount of dice, and you have 4 dice, I feel pretty comfortable two-handing.
Yeah, but that's only a 52% chance of a 6 on like 4 dice.
True, but sometimes, and I'm not saying a lot of the times, but sometimes having more killing power is more important than rolling that 6, and a lot of those times are when you still have 3 might remaining, so you're still pretty safe on getting to a 6 with might. Of course, fluffs are always a thing, but yeah, I feel pretty safe with 4 dice and going for a 6, and then if you roll a 5, it hurts because you need 2 might, but still, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I personally probably won't do it unless I have some extra friends in the fight, but now you're more likely to do it with heroes as well. I completely agree.
Yeah, I'm gonna test it out and see how it actually works out in games.
Yeah. Personally, I'm not... Like, for these things, these are one of those things where I'm just more comfortable running the odds on, like, a simulator. So imagining a few situations in my head, like this hero against that, and then just run the numbers through a simulator and seeing what the outcomes are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's more... Then you don't have to play games to figure it out. You can just do it quickly. Great. Also for warrior models with two-handers, you're still not going to take your entire front line as two-handers, but you'll have a few sprinkled in now, and it's pretty nice.
Yep.
Yeah, the one thing that I wasn't a fan of is spears, because they no longer mention that a model can only be spear supported by a single other model. That language somehow got lost. We're assuming this is still the case. Don't go around and like spear support a single hero with like 9 pikes. Please don't be that person.
Lowlands Wargaming told me I could.
No, I'm telling you can't. You shouldn't. It's just that the language isn't there anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Don't do that.
Just don't. But this should probably be addressed in an FAQ or an errata.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a little bit of a difference in here that says that heroes that are supporting may use their might points as normal, but they cannot declare, like if they declare their heroic action in the fight phase, they cannot support during that fight phase. Now, this already partially used to be this way, but specifically for strike. And now it's just for all heroic. So you can no longer heroic combat with a hero and then go spear support somewhere. Unless another hero called that combat and you're just benefiting from that combat, then you can spear support somewhere.
Yeah, how do you feel about this?
It's weird.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to it because there's probably some caveats that they're catching with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just weird.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It really only matters for like Gil-galad.
Yeah, that's the example that I was thinking of as well, but there probably are like a few other... I mean, there's an elf helm in the Rohan list who has throwing spears, and in the Rohan list he can use it as spear, so maybe that's a thing, but yeah, that's pretty far-fetched. Second one I like, or the next one I should say I like.
Oh, is that with the pikes?
Yeah. So
I like this.
Yeah, it's with
Hello.
Easterling players, stonks. Hello.
Stonks.
Pikes and cavalry. So if a model with a pike is charged, so important note, you need to get charged. But if a model with a pike is charged by a cavalry model, the model with a pike will gain +1 to wound the mount. Only the mount. You get +1 to wound the mount in the combat phase. This is lovely. Yep. This is a nice flavorful rule. Not a huge impact, but now the person charging really wants to win that combat if you're charging a pike. And I love it. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Interestingly, it does only apply for the front pike.
Yeah.
So if you're charging an Eastling pike block, then the pike supports do not gain this +1 to wound on the mount. Just the one that got charged. It's a minor thing. It's just flavorful. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's nice.
Because if you have pike supports, then you already have like 3 to 6 dice already. You're probably more likely than not to wound the mount if you win the combat. So it's not a huge impact, but I really like the flavor of it.
Yeah. And for Eastlings especially, you might just be two-handing with the front rank anyways, but...
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, sure.
Anyways. Let's see, what's next?
Yeah, it's a little note that we had. Because it's not specifically mentioned in the weapons and wargear part, but we thought it applied mostly in this section. Because a lot of the wargear that elves get in their profiles are now ruled as elven weapons, where they before were not. So think of spears, think of glaives, think of those kinds of weapons. They're all counted as elven weapons right now, or elven made.
Yeah. Yeah, so Rivendell Knights actually get to use their lands now if they're fighting against Fight 5 stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is nice. Another interesting tidbit here is that it specifies that missile weapons are also listed as elf-made, but it doesn't do anything. Except if you're fighting Goblin Town, because then it does work on the Goblin King. So if you now shoot the Goblin King with a whole bunch of elves, he doesn't get to use the bubbly mass, and the dude just dies.
That's good. I mean, it's such a corner case, but I'd be happy if that really were the case.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing, speaking of shooting weapons, the shooting has stayed the same, except dwarf longbows are now strength 3, up from strength 2.
Yeah.
So dwarf rangers go.
Yeah, for like the 2 people using them. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Hey, dwarf ranger lists already were pretty decent.
Yeah, I'm exaggerating a bit because I did really play against a few dwarf ranger lists, so this is a big buff for them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Speaking of buff, the opposite of buff is a nerf, and that's what happened to throwing weapons.
Yeah. They
can now only be taken by a third of your models. Similar to a bow limit, there is now also a throwing weapon limit. These two are separate. Yikes.
Yeah.
Grimhammers are crying because people loved to just bring a bunch of Grimhammers. Corsairs unnecessarily just got nerfed into
oblivion.
Non-existence.
Yeah. RIP.
yeah, they got a point more expensive, and their throwing weapons got taken away. Like, what? Rohan also hates this. Like, Foot Rohan can finally now use their throwing spears as also spear supports, but now they are limited to only a third.
So it's like, here's a spear, and you can throw it, but you could always just use it. But yeah, only like one of you 3 guys gets one. It's weird. Yeah.
So it seems like Games Workshop wants to crack down a little bit on the overwhelming shooting, and you also see this in army lists.
Yeah.
Like, we used to have Rangers of Avilion, and now we have the Garrison of Avilion, and it's similar principle, but now you have to take a bunch of Warriors Ministries because you have a 50% bow limit rather than 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so generally we see a crackdown on overwhelming shooting, which I think is healthy.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it overwhelming shooting didn't really have like a steady place on top tables, but there definitely were some scenarios and matchup where it just totally destroyed people, and yeah, I think this is a good change.
Yeah, the problem with shooting armies was a lot of scenarios didn't allow you to be shooty and sit back. So they were kept in check by the scenarios, but then if you did run into one and it was a scenario where they could sit back and shoot, I was like, I'm not having fun. There's nothing I can do here.
Yeah.
So it's good. The only footnote I want to put here is that blowpipes still specifically mention that they don't count towards the bow limit. So blowpipes and throwstones are like the only 2 things that now kind of break that and can still have your entire army shoot things.
Yeah, so go Druidan, I guess?
I mean, I'm here for it. I'm still waiting for Armies of Middle-earth to come out. I'm hoping that my naked Rose boys can, take the tournament scene by storm. Dicks flapping in the wind.
Yeah.
But we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. I'd love for you to feel that army more. So I'm hoping to see positive changes.
Yeah. So like the Riders of Rohan themselves didn't really get a buff, so it has to come from either the bonuses for the army list or roses themselves becoming cheaper or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But we'll see. This podcast is not about army lists.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, moving on, because there's lots of Wargear. Banners. The biggest change here is that banners now require line of sight.
Fair enough.
It used to be implied, but was never actually written, which was stupid.
Yep.
Also, a hero who counts as a banner must be standing in order to provide its benefits, just like a normal banner, which is also fine. There are generally a lot of clarification here of what counts as in range of a banner and not, and stuff like that. So I do recommend reading this passage, just to double check for yourself to make sure that you understand everything correctly.
Yep. Because
there's also some images in there, and they generally just help. It's better than us talking about it on the podcast. In terms of passing banners, this is another one of those where people are kind of annoyed. You used to be able to pass a banner to any warrior that could hold a banner, so not to a warg, but you could pass it to a troll if you wanted to. Now you can only pass it to a warrior model that has a banner option in their profile.
Yeah. And if they get a banner passed along, they must use that specific Wargear option from their profile. For instance, if your banner gets passed to a warrior model, and that warrior model has a spear and a shield, but that isn't a part of the banner option, so it would only have a banner, then the warrior that gets past the banner must drop his spear and shield.
Yep. All to make sure that you're using official Games Workshop models, and everything is completely what you see is what you get.
Yay.
Yeah. We've been over this. We're not a fan.
No.
I had specifically made Ranger banners and Founding Court banners, even if I always took Warrior of Mean Street banners, because I thought it was cool to have the correct model to pass it on to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and
well, to be fair, I mean, these models can still take banners except for the Founding Court. The Ranger can still take banners, so I'm happy that I still have that model. But it's annoying, and like Numenor, for example, like Last Lines get hit by this because they can take a banner of their elves, but then if they try to pass to a Warrior of Numenor, they just can't.
You just can't, yeah. And on the flip side, I kit bashed a lot of not a lot. I kit bashed like 2 or 3 elves to hold the banner and the shield, because you'd be silly not to bring a shield with the banner and get your D6. That's also isn't an option anymore. So yeah, rip those models, I guess.
Yeah. So the only model of Ministry that I have without a shield, the banner, is a really old metal one that I painted 20 years ago. And it is ugly as sin.
Oh, yeah. You're going to encounter quite a few old models now, I think.
Yeah, I'm more likely to just rip a shield off an existing one, or just still feeling one of a shield, but everyone just knows that it doesn't have a shield.
Yeah, probably,
Something
right?
like that.
Yeah.
That discussion still has to happen in the Netherlands, by the way. The TOs need to agree on stuff. Or not, they just make their own rules. That's also fair.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on. Elven Cloaks. They work the same as before, but now they also give a -1 penalty to shooting attacks that try to hit the model with an Elven Cloak.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Keep in mind that, of course, a natural 6 is always a hit, so...
Yeah, fair enough. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, great. I think a big buff for the Fellowship.
Yeah, definitely. And like specific army lists like Rangers of Mirkwood, for instance.
Yeah, but they generally would win the shooting war anyways. But
yeah.
Return of the King, for example, Aragorn was really weak to shooting. You had situations where you would lose a bunch of resources just from getting shot at on the way in.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
This helps a lot. Okay, war drums were changed quite significantly. They work along the same lines as before, but the technicalities have changed a lot, and this matters. They are now letting the model with a war drum call a heroic march for free each turn, and it has a range of 12 inches.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but this means two things. You used to be able to stack march and drum together. You can no longer do this. And it only really happened in Seize the Prize, honestly, so it's not that big of a deal. But more specifically, you now have to end your movement within 12 inches of the drummer because it's a march. You still have to do the whole on the double thing and etc.
Yeah.
So you have the downsides of that, because you used to be able to just go anywhere you wanted. You just have extra movement for the turn. But the upside is that, just like march, you can choose to activate other models first.
Yeah.
So you could call drum. Basically, you just drum every turn now.
Yeah.
And then if your opponent decides to disengage, you can chase them with extra movement. If they decide to attack you, you can still countercharge, and then your drummer just doesn't get to do anything that turn because they drummed, and they're the only ones that don't get to charge.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I mean, good change, right?
Yay.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm bummed because it hits Eastling specifically. Because the drummer used to be able to zoom all over the place and reposition really easily. But because stuff needs to end within 12 inches now, you can't really do that anymore. You have to stick with the force.
Exactly.
So what I used to do with the kind of drummer was on the last turn that I needed to drum with my main group, I would drum, the main group would advance, and the drummer would run off to a side objective and claim that, or hang back far enough that only Wargear would be in range that back pike rank or something.
Yeah, I know, but it means, that feels gamey, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's good that it's gone. I mean, I get you're upset a bit, but it's a good change.
No, I'm not upset. I'm just calling it out as a nerf.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
I don't mind the change. I think it's healthy.
Yep.
So the Warhorns have changed, and notably they are cheaper now. So they are 25 points instead of 30. It's not listed in the rules manual, but I think it's relevant to call it out. They now have a limited range of 24 inches rather than board wide, which is annoying, but fine. 24 inches is usually enough anyways. The model that carries the Warhorn gains Dominant 2, which is situationally useful. And they can, once per game, increase the standfast of a nearby hero by 3 inches, but they need to be within the range of that hero's standfast in order to do so. And heroes that have Warhorns can use that ability on themselves. So Boromir basically now has a 1 per game standfast of 9 inches rather than 6 inches.
And 4 long as well, right?
Yes. And all other heroes have horn, like Erkenbrand, I think, has a horn.
Yeah.
So that basically works. I think Helm Hammerhand also has a horn.
True. Yeah, the horn of Helm Hammerhand. Yeah. So yeah.
So instances like that, and it's still +1 to courage rolls, right? It's still that same effect, so it's pretty strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you need it, and it's cheaper now, and especially for heroes that have it baked in, it's quite nice to have.
I like this change, and I also like that they need to be in range of that standfast, because it means that they more often than not will travel along with the army. Because what it used to do is that the guy with the Warhorn would go somewhere in a corner of the map, get behind a building and just lie down and take a nap, and you never get to him. which was so unrealistic and
Yeah.
really upsetting. So this is much better.
Much better. And all rules changes encourage that, right? So dominance encourages you to stand on objectives.
Yep.
The stand fast increase encourages you to be with your guys. Any 24-inch range limit prevents you from just sitting in a corner somewhere.
Yep.
Because then at least some of your army is probably going to get out of range.
Exactly. So yeah, good changes.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to armor, we have a new type of armor called light armor, which is basically no armor except +1 defense against shooting attacks. So I think Survivors of Lake Town and Corsairs have this. So basically they will now be defense 3 except if you shoot at them, and then they're defense 4.
Yeah, I think it's a nice addition. Cool, flavorful.
I guess it's fine.
Yeah,
I don't know.
you could.
I'm not too fussed about this.
Yeah, I mean, you could judge this or call this a bit of a rules bloat because it's just one other thing you need to take into account. Makes it harder to get into the game. But because we're so, or at least a lot of us are so well known with the rules, this isn't really a big deal.
Yeah. Speaking of rules bloat, there's another armor type. It's Mithril armor. Which is the same as heavy dwarf armor in that it adds 3 defense, but it now also prevents you from getting rended.
Yeah, so you can't rend a model that has mithril armor.
Yeah, you can still be barged. So it's not like the armor of Gondolin, where it protects against all BPAs.
Exactly.
It's just
Yep.
rend.
Yep.
Specifically, which I think was already a thing, but now it's just in the rules menu instead of on the profile of whoever had it.
Yeah, the effect was pretty much the same, so yeah, it's just more clarification.
Yeah. Let's see, I think shielding didn't get changed. Yeah, it's now considered active ability, but it already kind of was, so you already couldn't shield when transfixed. You can still shield while prone, so nothing changed there.
Mm-hmm.
We have a new type of shield.
Light
which is a
shields.
light shield. So they don't give a bad defense bonus, but they allow you to shield.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah, I think I like it. I mean, this is once more an argument for rules bloat, but yeah, I don't mind it because there definitely are like different types of shields in the game, right?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Would you ever pay a point for a light shield?
Yeah, we actually had a bit of discussion on WhatsApp earlier this week on this because I think I would. I think I definitely would. Because paying an extra point in order to use 2 dice in a combat or stacking it in like 4 instead of 2 is pretty big. But yeah, you just tell what your argument was.
Yeah, so this was specifically for the Wildmen or the Warriors of Dunland or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
The cheapest chips, defense 3 base, and they have an option to take a flaming brand, but they also have an option to take a flaming brand and a light shield, but that one's 2 points extra instead of just a 1 point for the flaming brand.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm just not going to give them shields.
Mm-hmm.
I'll save those points and bring an extra dude or 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think I probably would take a few of those shields. So yeah, I would just have to see how that one turns out.
Yeah. So like, basically for me, it'll be like if I have 3 points left, I'll give 3 of my flaming brand dudes a shield.
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to, by default, give them all a light shield because I just don't think it's worth the point, especially for a list that has so many models anyways, because it's a very spammy list that you generally don't want to shield unless you're trying to prolong the game, and not enough of your models will have shield to do that to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough.
So, because it's not like +1 defense, because that's why shields were so strong, not just for the shielding rule, but also just generally +1 defense is really strong. Especially on like a defense 3 army that can then suddenly go 5 to wound instead of 4 to wound against other strength 3.
Oh yeah, definitely. Then usually you're taking all shields.
Yeah, exactly. Which is what I did with Corsairs, which now no longer possible, so I have to rip all of my shields off Corsairs, which...
Same for Angmar with me, yeah.
Yeah, yep. It sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, moving on, the last piece of work here, the most important one, the One Ring.
Yeah. Didn't
So-
really change that much.
No, the rules for the One Ring itself didn't change, but the rules for invisibility changed, and those are actually covered later, but I think we should just mention them now because they're so closely linked to the One Ring.
Yeah.
So, one thing that's strange is that the model that wears the One Ring, if you want to take it off, you need to make a courage test. That hasn't changed to intelligence. It's still courage.
Yeah, that's weird, right?
That is weird. You do need to take an intelligence test in order to charge a model that is wearing or that is invisible. So that has changed, and we knew that was happening because that was an example that was listed in an article.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the fact that you need to make a courage test to take it off is also kind of weird. As for invisibility, the most important change is that ring bearers, or just invisible models in general, now only have the fight of the enemy if there are no friendlies involved in that fight, spear support or otherwise.
That's weird, man.
Yeah, so if you, together with an elf, it's talking about Bilbo, Master Burglar or something, charge something, then you will no longer have halved that person.
Yeah.
But if you're fighting it on your own, you will have half that person.
Yeah, but how often is Bilbo fighting someone on his own?
Well, not anymore. No. Because you're not going to take any ring bearers other than Isildur. And there's one, I think, old Bilbo who has a special rule where he does allow for this to happen.
Yeah. Okay.
So those are the only ones that are now going to be seen a lot, and maybe Gollum because he's fight 4. So fight 4, halving stuff is still pretty strong.
Yeah, true.
But on his own, like, what is he really going to kill?
Yeah.
So the flip side is that enemies can now no longer use their spear supports against ring bearers. So it used to be that you can still spear support and everything, and rings and bat swarms, for that matter, would only have the value of stuff in base contact. And then if the spear support had a sufficiently high fight value, you could still use that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
That's now also gone. So, it does work both ways.
So you can just no longer spear support, or the spear support doesn't provide the fight value?
You can no longer spear support.
All right, check. Okay.
You could kind of almost see it as the old heroic challenge. Like, it's just the two of them fighting each other, unless you choose to also charge in extra warriors into base contact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, but the ring bearer only gets the benefits if no friends are helping them.
Okay. Yep, sure.
Which is fine for Isildur.
Yeah, he's not too fussed on that, no.
Yeah, but the ring bearer attack teams have been nerfed. And I'm happy for it because it always felt kind of annoying. Especially Gollum in, like, Goblin Town felt unavoidable because of the way Goblin Town could move around the king and Grinna and stuff like that. It was very hard to deal with.
Yep.
We also yet to see what the rules for bet swarms look like. So we'll have to see how that works.
Yeah, wait and see. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Next.
We made it. We're through Wargear.
Yeah, this was a long one.
Yes. Magic. I think I'm just going to let you take the lead on this one.
Yeah, sure. In some ways, Magic changed a lot, and in some ways, it didn't change at all. So for casting and resisting, nothing much has changed. There are still target values you need to hit, and you still need to use a will point to hit that target or to be able to throw a dice. So that didn't change a lot. What did change, however, were the magical powers themselves. And we will cover that next. Slight asterisk here is that heroic channeling has changed hugely. So there are no longer any channeled effects on magic spells. None. So the effect that a spell has is just the effect that a spell has. What happens now, if you call in heroic channeling, you still need to spend 1 will point in order to cast a specific spell, but for using the might point of the channeling, you automatically cast your chosen spell on a natural 6. So the targets are still able to resist the spell as usual, but they just need to resist on a 6. And if they roll a natural 6, of course they get their will back still.
Yeah, so basically you're trading a will point and a might point for a guaranteed cast and a really hard resist check for your opponent.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think this really only applies when you have like 1 will point and like a random might point that you probably won't be using left. So like last ditch, last turn efforts, somewhere around there. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, we didn't see channel often to begin with, except for like blinding light. And I don't think we'll see it again either, because of you're projecting, right? So you're letting your opponent know that you're doing a big spell play this turn, and you're doing it before any model has moved, so they can still react with a calling heroic move, or you're drawing attention to the fact that you're making a magical play.
Yeah. So it's I'm trying to think of situations where you would most definitely use this, and like there's maybe something to be said that if you want to cast a spell, you're on low will points, you maybe have 1 left, and you have a might left, and the target hero has no will left, or maybe 1, something like that, and you need to get a spell off that's already on a 5-up casting value, so you might as well channel it, something like that. I'm hard pressed finding like good examples.
Yeah, no, there will be niche situations where you use this, but I'm not going to see it a lot, I don't think.
Yeah. So another thing is that when you target a mount with a spell, the rider may attempt to resist. So this is a rollback of a previous FAQ, and the biggest example of this is, of course, a black dart. So when you're black darting a mount, it was the case that the hero on top couldn't resist the black dart, and now they can again.
Yeah, it's also for banish, actually.
On Riders of the Dead, like steeds, something like that?
No, like the Horses of Ringwraith, because the whole model has the keyword of spirit, because the Ringwraith has the keyword of spirit.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And then you could just target the horse and just do an auto wound on it, which felt really weird. But now at least the Ringwraith gets to try and resist if they want to.
Exactly, yeah. That's just yet another nerf for my Angmar. Don't know if they'll be coming out to play again soon, but I mean, it does make sense, and it is fair, so yeah, I can't be mad. So, now we're on to the actual spells. So, since there are so many changes, and to make it like more smooth and clear, we will divide the spells up into new spells, so totally new spells that are coming into the game, spells that have been changed, and spells that have been removed, so you will no longer be able to find in the rules manual. So, first one. So, the first spell is Fog of Disarray, which has a duration exhaustion. And this magical power targets the caster, and enemy models within 6 inches of the caster suffer a -1 penalty to any intelligence tests that they are required to make.
Yeah.
Boy.
Woo.
I don't know how often we'll be using this spell.
I think you're only using it if you have a caster with 3 will points every turn, and you have a turn where you're like don't have anything else to cast. You'll just chuck a 3 dice at this.
Something like that, yeah. So if you have like a Gandalf in Seize the Prize, and you have already moved but not reached the prize yet. Oh man, I'm just having difficulties coming up with examples here. Yeah, it's weird. So, yeah, okay. Next one then. This is a good one. Foil Magic. So, this magical power targets 1 enemy model within range. The caster may choose 1 magical power cast by the target with the exhaustion duration that is currently in play. That magical power immediately ends. This is a cool one.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's nice, and we see it on wizard profiles, so like Radagast, Saruman, Gandalf, I think all have this.
Yeah. I'm immediately thinking of like Paralyze.
So Paralyze is now exhaustion, which is also relevant to note because it didn't used to be. So you can cancel a Paralyze with it, which is quite nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Also, I feel like this is kind of to replace Sap Will a little bit because, spoiler alert, Sap Will got removed.
Yeah.
And therefore, if they didn't add this, there wouldn't be any way to get rid of an exhaustion spell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you couldn't really offensively drain the will of that caster. So now you at least have a way of doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I really like this, and it really puts forth more benefit or stocks for the big casters like a Gandalf. So yeah, it's a good spell. So the last new spell coming into the game is Writhing Vines, which has a duration temporary. This magical power targets the caster. Place a 25mm vine marker wholly within 3 inches of the caster. Enemy models treat the area within 3 inches of the vine marker as difficult terrain. Remove the vine marker during the end phase. It's a cool spell. How do you feel about it?
This is, I think, one that's going to be situationally really strong.
Yeah.
There's 2 situations. One is you're juggling for position and you need to get somewhere or whatever, and it's just enemies treated as difficult terrain. So if you get to move first and you turn into difficult terrain, you run away a little bit, you get to disengage and they can't charge you. stuff like that. It can be super strong.
Yeah, especially against cav armies, right?
Exactly, and that's the second use case. If you cast this after the cavalry army has charged, and just turn the area where they have charged into difficult terrain, they will lose all of their charge bonuses.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter that it wasn't difficult terrain when they charged. It is now difficult terrain, and they are in difficult terrain having charged. Like, we had a discussion on this when it was first spoiled, and the way the rules are written, it does work.
Yeah, so this is really big, yeah.
Yeah, you could maybe even, like, bait out a cavalry charge, have a caster of this in the back, be like, oh no, shit, fuck, you're going to charge me, it's going to mess me up, and then you just prop this out.
Yeah, just pop like 2 dice writhing vines. Especially when your hero got charged. That's really big.
Yeah, well, I don't know, like a Rivendell Knight list charging your shield wall and wrapping around, and then you're like, plop a marker of this in the middle, and then you're hitting a significant portion of those knights suddenly don't have their charge bonus anymore.
Yeah, I'm thinking like 3-4 knights maybe, which is big.
No more, because it's 3 inches either way. So you probably hit like 2 models in each direction plus 1 model in the middle. So probably about 5.
Yeah, 4 or 5. Yeah. It's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to the changed spells. First one is Aura of Dismay. It no longer gives terror, but it now gives a -1 courage or -1 to your courage test die roll within 6 inches of the caster. So yeah, huge nerf on Aura of Dismay.
Yes, but there is situations where this is pretty good because it does stack with Harbinger. Like Harbinger has got a language removed where it no longer stacks.
Okay.
So if you have Harbinger and this, you can give -2 to courage penalties. And because it's now a penalty to the roll instead of to the attribute, if you have orcs that need to hit an 8+, they can now technically be reduced below a courage of 1 that they didn't used to be. So there are situations where this is pretty decent, actually.
But because how many evil or how many hero models are there that have Harbinger that also have access to Aura of Dismay in their army?
I haven't looked into that yet.
I don't think it's a lot. I really don't, because
it's an alpha spell, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And Harbinger is like usually only with wraiths. However, I do think that Galadriel, Lady of Light, also has Harbinger, so that might be the only one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's definitely worse than giving everyone terror, but it's not awful.
No,
because terror doesn't make your enemy's models run away off the board when they're broken. This does.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so it's situational. It's not awful, but I think it's a bit of a debuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So next change, Black Dart has changed. Black Dart now does a Strength 6 hit instead of a Strength 9 hit. Also, I think it's important to note right here, although it's not specifically in the rules book, but Black Dart did get another nerf, and that is that the range of it on a lot of heroes that could cast Black Dart has been reduced to 6 inches from 12. So
everyone's Shadow Lord now.
Yep, basically, yeah. So it's like a double debuff, yeah.
Yeah, and also the resist is also a debuff, right?
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, so
the rider can resist even though you target the mount.
Mm-hmm. So for targeting the mount for the 2 wound roll, it doesn't matter much. It's probably still a 3, but it matters on like high defense heroes. But now people can resist the Black Dart on a mount. So yet another debuff for like Witch Kings and such.
I think black darting a hero to death is now no longer a viable strategy anymore, unless you have multiple casters and the hero is defense 6 or lower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like if it's a defense 7 hero, which is quite common if it's heavy armor and shield, then you need 5s to wound rather than 3s.
Yeah, which is big. It's like a 33% change or 66, something like that.
More, because it used to be 2/3 to wound and now it's a third to wound, so it's literally twice as hard to wound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, next one. The Blessing of the Valar no longer specifies that you have to choose the mount or the rider, which is, I guess, what would the change be here? That you can use the Blessing of the Valar and you get like a fate point back for both your mount and your hero?
I don't know. It's just strange that they removed the language in
Yeah.
the same edition where they're specifying that mounts and riders can share their resources.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. Yeah.
That's I spotted this one. I was like, what?
Yeah. So what mounts have fate? It's Shadowfax and the White Warg?
As to my knowledge, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Interesting.
I
Okay.
don't think this in practice has changed because I don't think you can argue that both of them are getting a fate point back.
No, you probably can't, but it's just weird that
it's
the
just
language
weird
changed.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly.
So something that changed a bit, but not entirely, is of course Blinding Light can no longer be channeled because there's no channeled version of the spell, so it's always temporary. But the illumination area of the Blinding Light is now reduced. It was 12 inches and it is now 6 inches. So this is important for fighting at night, right?
Exactly. So it used to give the 6-inch R off, 6 is the hit, but 12 inches would be illuminated, and now both of those are 6 inches.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a slight change. I think it's far more important that you can no longer channel it, but still, it changed a bit.
Yeah.
Yep. Next one is Call Winds. Call Winds now blows model D3 plus 3 inches away and not D6, which makes it a lot more reliable. But it now also no longer knocks the combat prone, and it also no longer stops 1 inches away from terrain. The reliability is better, but the effect is a bit worse.
Yeah. Although you can still blow models out of a combat, which is situationally quite strong.
Yeah, but it just doesn't knock them prone.
Yeah, so you cannot choose a friendly. So otherwise you could like bail out a friendly model out of a combat by just blowing them away.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So now you can do the opposite. You can blow the trouble-making model out of a combat,
Yeah. So
the enemy model, but they get a resist. So
yeah, and there weren't a lot of models that could use this spell, so not a huge effect, I think.
no, the one that could use it has got legacy. But,
Storm Callers.
yeah, Kirdon got it instead.
Oh, okay. Oh, so he has a bit of offensive power now.
It doesn't do damage.
Yeah, you could argue the what you define as offensive, but yeah, okay, yeah, that's another discussion. Okay, on to the next. Collapse Rocks got a bit of an increase in strength. Collapse Rocks now does a strength 7 hit instead of a strength 5. Plus, it also now knocks you prone. And cavalry models, if you target them, suffer the knocked flying result automatically. So this is actually a pretty big buff for Collapse Rocks, and so for Gandalf. Yeah.
And it also specifies you can use it inside buildings made out of brick.
I think that that always was the case. I double checked.
I think I might have, but I in my head I had it as only for like rocky terrain, and I was like, it's useless. But actually, ruins are common enough that you might actually be able to use Collapse Rocks with Gandalf now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I did check, and that always was the case. But yeah, okay. It's still pretty big buff. Yeah.
I haven't ever seen it used, but maybe I will.
Maybe we will. Day. Yeah, exactly. So the next one is a pretty big nerf. Command and Compel, those were actually the same spell, no longer transfixes the model after you have moved it. It was an insanely strong spell, so it's good that it got nerfed, but this really is a big nerf. So what you can only do now is that you can move a model half its move distance. That's something people also sometimes got wrong. But half the move distance, and then that model can still fight and do other stuff except for moving.
And if it once it has been moved, it cannot be moved again for any reason. So no chain compelling. You already weren't able to do that, but just you used to not able to do that because the target got transfixed, and now you can't do it because the spell specifically says you can't.
Yeah, and you can't also chain it, I think, with the Spectre special rules and such.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's still strong because it's a positional piece, and position is the most important part of this game.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it's no longer 2-for-1,
exactly.
where you pull an enemy hero out of position and transfix them, and now they're just fucked because you charged them with a Kulofar or something.
I used to love doing that, but yeah.
I know, but it was a bit too strong, so
yeah.
I'm happy.
Yep, true. All right, next one. Enchant Blades. It now specifies that you can only reroll the wounds for strikes specifically. So you can no longer do like trample shenanigans and reroll the trample hits. So only when making strikes.
Yeah, so this used to be possible with Wargear and the Chariots. You could do Enchanted Blades on a King in Chariot. He calls Hero Combat, and then he would technically reroll all the trample hits because he was doing 2 wound rolls in the combat phase.
Yeah.
Which is what he used to say.
Yeah, exactly. So good change.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not like enchant chariot wheels or something like that. No, it's enchant blades.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Next one is Enraged Beast. The target now suffers a wound at the end of the turn, so the beast that you enrage suffers a wound. Used to be a strength 10 hit, now it's just another wound. And it also gives the target model fearless instead of giving it +2 courage. So it's a buff and a debuff all in the same package.
Love it, because I can't imagine just how many times my opponent didn't roll a 3+ to wound their own spider. Infuriating, so at least now they will auto wound.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about the fearless, that's fine. I think that's thematic, because nothing sucks more than, despite the buffed courage, still failing your courage test and not being able to charge after you enrage the beast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So this is fine.
Yep, it's totally fine. Next one is Flame Burst. It now specifies that it is, in fact, a fire-based spell. So you are just throwing fire at people. This is mostly important for when you flame burst like a dragon or Smaug or a Balrog. They have immunity to fire, so you can no longer flame burst those models.
Yeah, they generally have just specified fire type attack.
Yeah.
At several things, like flame weapons. I think brands maybe have something like it, but it's dragon breath and stuff like that. The fiery lash of the Balrog is now also, in fact, a fire weapon. Mm-hmm. So stuff like that has just been clarified.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, okay. Next change is Fortify Spirit. It now gives you a 1d6 extra resist die and not 2. Which I think is a good balancing thing because spells are not nearly as strong as what they used to be. Some spells got removed and changed around, so having 1 die extra resist, it still stacks with resistance to magic. I don't know how often it is the case that you get both, but still stacks. It just gives 1d6 instead of 2.
I think you'll quite often have it on Gandalf. Because he can now take Pippin as a passenger, which gives him a resistance to magic, and he can cast Fortify Spirit on himself. So he'll be basically Glorfindel with 2 free resist dice.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's probably the only case, I think, right?
You might cast it on Alisar, who also has resistance to magic.
Yeah, true. Or maybe like in the Battle of Fornost, when you have like Fortify Spirit and resistance to magic with Glorfindel.
Well, no, you don't have Fortify Spirit, but you just have... Oh, with Glorfindel, yes.
Yeah, Glorfindel, yeah.
But that already was the case. He just had 3 dice in the old...
Exactly, he got nerfed a bit there. Yeah. Yep, okay.
Yeah.
All right, next one is Instill Fear. Instill Fear now gives the models the Fearful special rule for 1 turn. And it does not make you make them take a courage test and that they run after. So just the Fearful special rule for a turn.
Yeah, which basically means that they have to pass a courage test in order to charge.
Yep.
I think Fearful is the reverse of Terror, so they basically treat everything as if it has Terror.
Yeah. We haven't got to the special rules. We'll be there soon, but yeah, true.
I mean, soon. We're only 3 hours in.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Let's keep plugging along. The paralyzed spell is now Exhaustion. So that has changed. And also, all friendly models in base contact may help wake them up, even if they shot or fought that turn. So this is a small change. It used to be that they couldn't have done anything else that turn except move into base contact. Now they can. Yep. So yeah, pretty obvious what was changed here.
Yep.
So now Protection of the Valar. It now also makes the target harder to shoot with a -1 to hit for anyone shooting the target. And it used what did it used to be that they couldn't target them with magical attacks?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or special rules.
Yeah.
So that's still the same. So it just still has that and a -1 to hit for shooting.
Yeah.
I think this is fine. You didn't see it that often.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's fine. Next one is, however, a big change. Sorcerer's Blast. It now only gives the target a strength 5 hit and knocks them prone. So it no longer knocks you back, just knocks you prone. And cavalry models are automatically knocked flying. I think that was the same as it used to be. And when you have a combat, all models are knocked prone, but don't get a strength 5 hit in this case. And so it no longer hurls models away or anything of the such, just knocks you prone. So, big change.
Only the target gets to hit. Yeah, so it's overall quite a bit nerfed.
Yeah.
It will still have its uses. I really dislike the fact that they put the language of like automatically suffer the like knocked flying result, because that used to be just a rule somewhere in general, and then that just applies to whenever cavalry gets knocked prone for any reason. They just count as having rolled a 1.
Yeah.
And it's still the case, but they just specify it everywhere. It's just unnecessary use of words. Anyways, rant over. Swords of Blast got nerfed. Saruman hates this, but it's still useful.
Doesn't like it, no. Yeah, but still useful, just not as overpowered as it used to be. Yeah. So I'm actually going to give you this next one, Kevin.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Please tell me.
We're talking about Tremor, and it's because Tremor is one of my favorite spells with Wargear. And Tremor, it got nerfed into the ground. So it starts with increasing its range from D6 to D3 plus 3 inches. So that starts off good, but it's directly away from the caster rather than away from the target. So Broger used to be able to just target something at 6 inches of range and then do D6s from there, so it gives you a lot more flexibility. This means you have to be up close and personal in order to hit many things with it. Also, it used to be strength 6 hit, now it's strength 4, and all models in a combat that is effective are considered a target for resist purposes. That also was a very weird FAQ where they were like, only things on the line can resist, and we're like, okay. And you could technically just Tremor a combat without a hero being able to resist it and then just getting knocked prone with no counterplay. So that's also gone. And last but not least, fly models are completely unaffected by Tremor, because I guess it's an earthquake.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Even though they have to land in order to get into a combat, which specifies that in the fly rules, never mind, they're unaffected.
Yeah.
So this spell is not going to get used at all by anyone unless there's going to be a combat character like Elrond, where they will just cast it when charging into a combat. But Broker is not that character, right?
No, exactly.
And Black Shield Shamans are also not that character, and they were the only ones that had it. Because Broker doesn't want to charge stuff if he can help it. Like, he could, but...
Spear supporting, maybe?
Exactly. Like, sure, he'll probably live if he charges a random warrior and then on the way in does a Tremor and maybe hits a few things with strength 4 hits. That's fine. But it's not what it used to be. So yeah, unfortunate. Probably not going to run Wargear. Well, it really depends on what his profile is going to look like. Yeah. But if it's mostly the same with the same kit and his main thing is still like being able to cast Tremor and Fury, then maybe it's just going to be a pass.
Probably, maybe, yeah. Yep, okay. So the last changed spell, well, actually, no. The last thing you wanted to mention is the Wither spell, because it didn't change, still the same effect. You still get a -1 to your strength if cast successfully. But there is a new rule that states when your model gets to strength 0, it is automatically slain and removed from the game. So what you could do, and I don't know why you would, but you could, is that you cost like 3 or 4 withers on a hero, and if he does not resist them, he gets to strength 0 and he is slain and removed from the game. Of course, he wouldn't actually not allow that to happen, but yeah, okay, I guess you could.
I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if it'll ever come up, but just the idea of doing 4 withers on an Aragorn and just Aragorn being gone is quite funny.
It is, but I mean, do you really want to spend that much resources on Aragorn? And I think after the first one and you're going to cast another one, he's probably on to what you're doing right there and going to try and resist, so yeah. He's
probably just going to resist the first one. Actually, it depends. If he has Anduril, he's not going to resist any of them until he gets to the last one.
I mean, yeah, probably. So, I don't know.
This doesn't do anything until...
I think...
Because Anduril is always a 4+ anyways.
Like, the only case where this could have been really interesting is in combination with the Shadow of Rudour, and if we still had channel effects, because if the Shadow of Rudour costed on a 6, it was a channeled version, and you got down to D3 strength, I actually got a Glorfindel down to strength 1 in the tournament in Amersfoort. But yeah, that's the only case I would think of that where it would have been interesting, but that's no longer the case. Yeah. Okay. So now on to the removed spells. We can be short and sweet on this. There are 4 spells that have been removed. First one is Refreshing Song. So go eat a big fat one. Tom Bombadil. Bye-bye.
Get fucked.
Yeah. Then Shroud of Shadows. Also gone. I actually don't know which... It was Ringwraith, right? That had the spell?
No, the Necromancer had it, and one of those goblins could give it to spiders.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Shatter is gone, but also like the guys who cast it are gone. It was like the Black Shield Shamans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're gone already. So bye-bye. And this is the most important one. Sap Will is gone. So once again, Witch King and Angmar are getting nerfed. Sap Will, you can no longer remove like D3 will from a hero on a single cast, and they're like, okay, guess I'll be transfixed for the whole game. No, you now actually have to make them spend the free will. So yeah.
And do it when it matters. It's like you could just do Sap Wills on turns where you're not fighting yet, and it's just basically free attempts to get will gone.
Yeah.
Now you kind of have to wait until you can compel the more transfixion in a turn where it will actually matter. Otherwise, you're going to be like, yeah, cool, fine, you get to move me or transfix me, I don't care, right? You know?
Yeah, I think the final hooray for this was in my Belgium GT last week, where, like you said, before the lines clash, you just, okay, I use one will to cast a Sap Will on this hero. I get to reroll that one die, so there's like a 66% chance or something that I get to hit it. No, less. I think it was around 50%. But anyways, it was like, okay, you get a Sap Will, you get a Sap Will, you get a Sap Will, and all 3 of your heroes are out of will once the lines clash. Bye-bye, have fun. Yeah, no longer the case.
Yeah. So overall, this is fine. Some of these spells were problematic. Sap Will, for the reasons we just listed. Shatter, because half the FAQ was questions about Shatter.
Yep.
Shadows was, I don't know, not that problematic, so I'm not entirely sure why it got removed, but I'm also fine with it. And Refreshing Song was just Tom Bombadil, and nobody cares. So
yeah, Tom Bombadil just needs to be removed in its entirety.
I just hope he doesn't show up in Armies of Middle-earth. I just kind of forgot about him.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Please don't. Yeah. Exactly. Okay.
Anyways, we made it through the spells.
Wow, okay. Still got a few ways to go.
All right. Special rules. Okay, there's quite a lot to cover here, so I'm going to go through them relatively quickly.
Yep.
There, in general, is a lot of minor phrasing changes. There's a lot of stuff that has been changed from may to must, especially with like rerolling to wound and stuff like that. So if you have special rules in your army, double check this section. Don't just assume that it's the same way because we didn't mention it. It might just have a small phrasing change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's dive straight into it.
Yep.
Ancient Evil, it's gone. It's been replaced by Harbinger. Harbinger now has range specified. So some models have Harbinger 6, like the Mouth of Sauron. Wraiths have 12 inches range on their Harbinger, etc. So Ancient Evil is just gone and it's been replaced with basically Harbinger 18 inches. I guess Sauron has that. I haven't checked, but I assume so.
Okay, just a little bit of room and time to address a pet peeve of mine. Even against the British, please stop calling this Harbinger. Nobody is bringing any Hars. It's Harbinger. So, just to get that out there.
Okay. Noted. that was random.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know. It's just I've been annoyed at that ever since I read the rule as okay, cool, Harbinger, and everybody calls it Harbinger. It's weird, but okay, time to move on.
Fair. Yes. So Bane of Kings, which is used to be shared with Venom, but they're now separate. Bane of Kings is now still reroll to wounds when making strikes, but also shooting attacks. So it's a minor buff for Prasharan, I guess, with their blowpipes.
Yeah, okay.
Assuming they still have them, because we haven't seen them yet.
Yeah.
Cool, moving on.
Yeah.
Bodyguard, a minor change here. It now works on the faction keyword rather than just the general of the list that they are in, because of course we can't ally anymore, so we're just an army list.
Yeah.
So a good example of how this works, if you take a list with Gandalf the White and Irolas, for example, in the top of the walls, Gandalf the White has the Fellowship faction keyword. Irelas has the Ministry of faction keyword. So any of the Sildar guards that Irelas brings, who also have Ministry of faction keyword, will not be bodyguarding Gandalf, even though he's your leader. They will be bodyguarding Irelas.
Yep, fair enough.
A niche, but can matter. Blades of the Dead, we already covered this earlier, but it has swapped around, so now you need to do some math in order to work out what you're hitting, and Warhorns and Harbinger don't work on it, because Warhorns and Harbinger give a penalty to the roll rather than to the stat.
Yeah, exactly.
So Blades of the Dead basically unchanged, but how they change with Harbinger and stuff is a little bit different. In some situations, it's just weaker or stronger than before.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Blood and Glory is gone. It's been replaced by General Hunter, and General Hunter is basically Blood and Glory, except it only works on the enemy general.
Yep.
So you only get a white point back if you kill the enemy general.
Yeah.
Then we have Dominant. Dominant is the big one. Basically Dominant X, so there's a value behind it, and basically that means that the model counts for a certain number of models for the purpose of working out how many models there are on the objective or have moved off the board for reconnoiter. So if you have a Toral with Dominant 5 on an objective, he counts as 5 models. And you might just win the objective from your opponent who has 3 models there, where in the old rules you would lose, despite having a big astral there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also a thing to note is that in your army, your general always gets the Dominant 3 special rule. So your general always counts as 3 models.
Yeah. Speaking of which, there are actually quite a few sources of Dominant. We covered it earlier with Warhorn, but there's also like a bunch of special rules that can either give a model Dominant or even temporarily can give a model Dominant for a turn.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. They've used this a lot, so it's cool to see. Like, unlike Intelligence, which we haven't seen a lot of yet, Dominant is actually something that comes back quite a bit in the rules for specific army lists and specific models.
Yeah, I really like it. It's an awesome rule.
It's great. It's a good balancing tool as well.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
Yeah, now it's no longer you have to make low model count lists super powerful so that they still have a chance in objective scenarios. Now you can just make them balanced this way.
Yep.
Okay, next up we have Fearful, which basically means that if they want to have the charge, they have to make a courage test at the start of their move. If they fail, they may still move, but they just can't charge, which is different from Terror, because Terror means you can't move at all.
I don't know, man. If I read the explanation, if this test is failed, the model may not move that turn, but may otherwise act normally.
Sorry, I completely missed a knot there.
Yeah.
It's late and I'm tired, so I'm happy that you're here with me.
Yeah.
Never mind. Basically, Fearful gives everyone else terror.
Yeah. So you can take a courage test, and if you fail it, you may not move, but you can still do things as like shooting or casting or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Fly has had a lot of words added to it. So if you're playing a model with Fly, go read this. But basically, in summary, some highlights: you cannot land where other models can't reach. So no more landing on top of buildings that it's not realistic to climb to and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You need to land before casting magical power, so you can no longer cast the magical power while hovering over the enemy battle line. And you cannot land in control zones unless you charge that model. That hasn't really changed. That already was the case, but it's being specifically called out here.
Yeah, good thing that they clarified this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. There's some other stuff about movement values and what happens if you land and stuff like that and forest. So if you play models with Fly, do take the time and read this.
Yeah, check it out. Yeah.
General Hunter is a new rule that we already covered. It's basically Blood and Glory, but only for enemy generals. So next up is Harbinger of Evil. Other than the range that we mentioned earlier, it also now specifies that a model that has the Harbinger of Evil rule is not affected by enemy Harbinger of Evil rule.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, so your Sauron is no longer scared of the enemy Ringwraith.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fair enough.
Good. Moving on. Horse Lord is the same as it was before, except that you can now roll a d6 whenever your mount is wounded, and on a natural 6 that wound is ignored, and then after that roll, you can choose to spend fate.
Yeah, this is big, really big. Like
it's a nice little buff for Horse Lord.
I mean, it's sure, but if you take it en masse, like for let's say for Rohan, I think this is really big. You save like 1 in 6 horses more.
Yeah,
it's really big.
But it's only on heroes, and heroes are paying 20 points for their horses now.
Yeah, is it? Don't the regular Riders of Rohan also have Horse Lord?
No, they have Expert Rider.
Ah, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so it's not like all horses have Fury. It's specifically for heroes with Horse Lord.
Yeah.
I think it's fair because horses, as I said, are more expensive now, which is fair because they were too cheap for how much power they gave heroes. But there's also a lot of ways for shooting to now target specifically horses with sharpshooter and stuff like that. And hurl being able to target stuff without, instead of having to draw a line. Because that's a buff for hurl as well, right? It's no longer the line away from the model. It's just anything within range. So you can hurl something behind the thing that you're fighting. So
Yeah, true. Yeah, so it's a good balance change.
I think so. So heroes that really care about their horses tend to have Horse Lord. And the ones that don't, it's on purpose to make it a weakness.
Yep.
So I like it. Invisible has been turned to a special rule instead of a section in the ring area, which implies that maybe we'll be seeing other things with invisible rules.
Maybe, yeah.
We have already covered this, but just in case you skipped to this section, you can no longer give yourself half the fight value of the enemy and also have friends in that combat. You can only do that if you're on your own on the combat. So you can't have spear supports, you can't have a friend fighting your target along with you. But the flip side is that your opponent can also not spear support against you.
Yeah.
So you can choose to have friends fighting as when you're invisible as a ring bearer, you just will not have the fight value anymore. So
yeah,
it's not like it prevents you from doing it, it's just that you don't get the benefits if you do so. So we already covered this. Isildur stonks are still high, everyone else stonks are down.
Yeah, and just for completion's sake, you now need to make an intelligence test instead of a courage test if you want to charge an invisible model, and the -1 debuff for every inch that you're away from that model still applies. And of course, the thing of ring wraiths being able to see invisible models and still do the normal stuff like they used to be able to is also still there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, next up, large targets. We had an FAQ, like 2 FAQs ago, where large flying creatures, like monster flyers and war beasts, no longer got in the ways from infantry and cavalry. That has now been turned into a separate rule called large target. Anything that has a large target no longer gets in the ways from models that don't have the monster, siege engine, or war beast keyword.
Yeah. So, just to be sure, is the part on flying monsters where they were able to be targeted by shooting attacks without in the ways, has that part completely vanished from the fly special rule and this has been added?
Yes.
All right. Cool.
But basically all flying monsters have large target.
Yeah.
So
basically. Yep. Okay.
Same.
Yep.
Yeah. Keep in mind that just like before, you still have to take in the ways for the combat itself if they're fighting something, which means that you cannot shoot at a large target that is in combat if you are a good model.
Yep. Fair enough.
Okay. We're getting there.
Yeah,
Leader.
we're getting there.
We covered this earlier. Leaders are allowed to bring elite models that have that model name. So leader Citadel Guard means that you can bring Citadel Guards in your warband. Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Monster's Charge has been rewritten slightly, which is interesting. It now says it always gives +1 attack. Previously, it was written that it was basically the benefits of cavalry and also against enemy cavalry, which meant that against chariots and war beasts, you didn't get the +1 attack.
Yeah.
And now you do.
Yeah.
Which is good. But it no longer says a cavalry model that has Monster's Charge, like a fell beast, will now get +2 attack against enemy infantry. Question mark?
Probably not, but rules...
It shouldn't,
yeah.
but it doesn't say that it doesn't stack with cavalry bonuses.
Yeah, a case could be made for rules as written. They can, but I'm thinking most people will judge that they can't.
No, and don't be that person. But
exactly.
Rules as written, yeah, they get +2 attack against infantry.
Yep.
This didn't change. Oh yeah, Set Ablaze. It's the next one. So the initial strength 9 hit from Set Ablaze is just gone. Now it's just strength 5 hits at the end of every turn. So a small nerf for Set Ablaze, but I have seen a few more effects with Set Ablaze in like profiles and stuff. So that's the flip side. Because it got slightly nerfed, and they can now give it to more things because it's not as strong as it was. Which I like, because it's a fun and thematic thing. Like setting things on fire, who doesn't like setting things on fire?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, next up, Sharpshooter. This is a new rule, which basically says that if you target something, a mount or a rider with a shooting attack, you can choose whether you want to hit the mount or rider, and you no longer have to take an in the way test to see who you hit. You still have to take in the waste for everything else as normal, but if there's a mount or cavalry in the open, you can say, I want to hit that horse, and then you just only need to roll the hit. You don't need to roll to see if you hit the mount or the rider. Or the other way around, like you can also just target the rider.
The rider, yeah, exactly, yeah. A few examples of this is like the new Hammer model, I think, from the new box set for Rohan. And of course Legolas has this as well.
Yeah, and Faramir has it, and stuff like that. Generally, archery heroes tend to have it.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice, and against warg riders, you would probably just target a rider and hope to kill it, and the warg run away. Stuff like that. So it's quite nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Shield wall has been slightly changed. You now calculate the bonus for shield wall before backing away rather than after backing away, which means it's easier to keep shield wall while in combat. It used to be the case where warriors in Minas Tirith would only have shield wall while moving towards the enemy. Now you can also feasibly keep it in combat. And the same thing goes for Iron Hills warriors. So a small buff, because as the lines break and things get chaotic, you will have a hard time keeping shield wall.
Yeah.
But now the first 2 rounds of combat, you might be able to hold on to it.
Yeah, exactly. Mostly when you have like straightforward lines that have clashed. It's pretty much backing away is just a 1 inch backwards, so you'll most likely keep it for a few rounds.
Exactly. It's also a small argument for more warriors of Minas Tirith with spear and shield.
Yep, true.
Rather than just rangers with spear. Especially now that they're fight 4 rather than fight 3, which is nice.
Yeah, yay.
Okay, Spectral Walk is massively changed. This is for the ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
The Dead of the Unharrow.
Army
they
of
are
the
now
Dead,
they are now never slowed by difficult terrain, and they always count as scoring a 6 on climb, jump, swim, leap test, etc.
This is pretty big, yeah. This makes
and
them like movement monsters, like spiders or something.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
And they can't walk through walls, so it's not like they go full ghost mode. But everything else is almost fair game. And also, they got moved up to move 8.
Ooh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, the Dead of the Narrow are super fast.
Yeah.
Their cavalry are move 12.
Whoa, okay.
And are not slowed by difficult terrain. So they can just move 12, charge into forest.
Damn, I didn't know that.
And then just die because they're fight 3. Because that didn't change. But
yeah, okay.
Small blessings.
Yep.
Okay. Stalk Unseen. Interestingly enough, the line about riding a mount got removed from this. So technically now Stalk Unseen works even if you're riding a mount.
Yeah, I think this is mostly important for elves, right? Because they have an elven cloak, and the elven cloak gives you the Stalk Unseen rule.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Terror got changed slightly. It used to be the case that if you want to charge a terror model during your turn, even though you technically couldn't charge it at the start of your movement, you already had to make a terror test, because you maybe could charge a terror model if you kill something with a throwing weapon or move something around with an ability or a spell.
Yeah.
Now it has been changed that you need to make a test at the beginning of your movement as normal, unless a situation pops up later where now you can charge a terror model that you couldn't before, then you charge at that specific moment. And then if you fail, you just stop and don't do anything else anymore. Which is a pretty big buff for throwing weapons and magic, because now you get to see if it just goes off first before you have to do testing shenanigans. Also, there's some interesting interaction here with jumping over prone models that came up in our Discord server. You can try and jump over a terror model, and then if you roll a 1, you have to charge it. And I would say then you have to test at that point. And then if you fail, you stop. And then if you roll 2 to 5, you can choose to charge it or not, but you end up on the other side of it. But if you choose to charge it, of course, by head, you still have to make the terror test. But it's not specifically written out, but that's just how it seems to make the most sense.
Yeah, it seems like to me that would be the case. Yeah.
Okay. Next up, we have Timid, which is a new rule, I think, for ponies. If a mount has this rule, then every time it wants to charge, it has to make a courage test, and it may use the rider's courage value, but it cannot benefit from special rules or magical powers that allow it to auto-pass.
So you basically always have to test.
You always have to test, but you can use the courage of the rider.
Yeah, okay.
So I think this is mostly for ponies from like Thorin's company and stuff.
Yeah, true.
Okay, Venom is sort of new. It was Bane of Kings earlier and also Venom. It's reroll filled to wounds, that's the same thing. But at the end of the combat, if you wounded something that wasn't killed, on a d6 On a natural 6, it suffers an additional wound.
It's a nice little buff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do wonder how this works with hero combats. If the venom kills it, do you still get your hero combat?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think so.
I would say yes, but it's interesting.
Yeah,
right?
don't be that guy that argues this.
Yeah. No, I won't be. I have an eye for stuff like this because it also gets used against me. And I hate that.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
Fleet Foot is no longer in the special rules. It's now merged with Woodland Creature, and now simply if the mount has Woodland Creature, that's basically Fleet Foot.
Yep.
If the rider has Woodland Creature and is riding a normal mount without Woodland Creature, you do not get the benefits of it while riding. Okay, that was the special rules.
Okay, we're almost there.
Advanced rules. Okay, so for the advanced rules, we're going through them relatively quickly. We originally debated skipping these because they're niche, but a few of them actually come up in competitive play every now and then.
Yep.
So we decided to dwell on those. So for swimming, you can no longer lie down in water on purpose to try and drown yourself. Good. Let's move on. Dwarf armor is taken out of the swim chart, so that no longer gives you a -1 penalty for swim tests, which is interesting. So it's basically treated as normal armor now. Anyways, so light objects are now always a 25mm marker. It doesn't really have an impact on the game, it just clarifies it. We already did it this way, it's just specified now as this way.
Fair enough.
Same thing for a heavy object, it's now also a 25mm marker, and it must always be dropped at the end of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can move it full movement with two models is if they both activate at the same time when they were already in base contact.
Yeah.
And this actually has come up with my games for a few times where my opponents were far too free with moving their bomb around, where they would like move it a little bit with one model, then join it with another model, and then move it to full distance remaining with the two models. I'm like, you can't do that.
No.
That's not how activating models work. But there was nothing from my argument either, because nowhere it specifies how exactly you were supposed to activate models that were carrying heavy objects together.
Yep.
Like, there were no rules for activating multiple models at the same time, and now there is. So
it's now official.
Okay. Yeah, so the rules for passengers, they have not changed as far as we could see, but they are more relevant now because other than, Durnhelm, which is no longer profile by the way, it's now just Eowyn with the Merry Wargear option. There's more options. There's Frodo and Arwen, there's Pippin and Gandalf, and there is Legolas and Gimli in the Ride to Helm's Deep, which is really cool.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
Sentries we're going to skip, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? Fighting at Night got a whole section, so that's like fully specified now how it works. Mm-hmm. I don't think it actually changed.
No, it didn't change. No, it's just got fully specified, and a few FAQs got added in, so it's all there in one convenient place.
Yeah. So one thing to note is I think illumination got changed a little bit, or at least specified. If you are shooting now at a model that's illuminated, you will not gain a bonus of +1 to wound. So blinding light now not only makes you sixes to hit, but also removes the +1 to wound in that area. But of course, you will also gain a range increase because you can now see them from further away than 12 inches. But most armies that liked shooting at night didn't care about that to begin with. Okay, moving on. Siege engines. Siege engines can, from what I can see, no longer buy extra crew.
Siege veterans, right? Or siege
or siege engineer captains. Oh, speaking of which, engineer captains gone.
Oh, okay.
Those are also no longer a thing. From what I can see, I might be missing some pages here, so do take this with a bit of a grain of salt. Siege engines are now always deployed as your first warband. As it used to be that it's just part of your normal deployment. They just had to be deployed within 6 inches of the board edge, and that was it. Now they have to be deployed first.
Yeah.
In terms of movement, quite a few things changed. They can now no longer be moved half. It's just full move or no move, and small needs 2 people to move it, and large need 3 people to move it, and that's the same as before.
Okay.
Now, a siege engine can at the moment be moved freely, but in the new rules, it can also be rotated without moving. And the reason why this is relevant is that siege engines now have a 45-degree angle in which they can fire.
Yeah.
So if something's out of your arc of fire, you now need to rotate your siege engine before you can shoot it. And most siege engines still allow you to shoot when rotating, but will do so at a -1 penalty to hit.
Yeah, so basically if you have moved half with a bow model, it's the same effect.
Yeah. There are a few siege engines that have the static rule, which means they cannot be rotated and they cannot be moved. So once you deploy them, that's it.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So the Trebuchet has this, for example.
Yeah.
So in practice, you're going to plonk this in a corner and angle it so that it faces the enemy. And then you're just not going to move it. But we'll get back to the Trebuchet in a minute. There are still battlefield and siege targets, but it now is more clearly specified what is a target what is a battlefield target and what is a siege target, because it now uses those unit types rather than just giving you an example list, which is great, because now it's just battlefield targets are infantry models, cavalry models, monster models, chariot models, doors, and small siege engine models. And siege targets are large gates, war beast models, including their howdahs, smaug, houses, boats, and large siege engine models. Now there's a few in here that you can have discussions about, but those are the ones that are for narrative play, like doors and houses and boats, etc. Those are for scenarios, obviously. Mm-hmm. The ones that we care about are for mesh play, and all of those types have been covered.
All right. Okay.
They're all in here.
Yep.
So now we know. We know that the Balrog is in fact not a siege target because he's not in this list. He's not a war beast. He's not Smaug.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. It still has the same language where it's you might want to shoot at something that's not in the list, and then you just have to discuss it and agree. But everything that we can use in match play is basically in this list, and that section will just cover narrative play. So if you're doing a siege scenario at home, go nuts, right? You can use whatever you want and that makes sense to you.
Oh yeah, but this should be clear enough for most match play scenarios.
Yeah.
All right.
So shooting a siege engine, like I mentioned, there's a 45-degree arc within which you can shoot. You cannot shoot your siege engine if there are enemies in base contact, which is also different. I used to be able to just mow down people that try to disable my bolt thrower by just shooting them in the face, which you will no longer be able to do.
Yeah, okay.
It's confirmed that you use the worst shoot value of the crew. It used to have some ambiguous language. Now it's been confirmed. And disabling a siege engine has been clarified. If you want to disable a siege engine, it has to be done in the combat phase at the end of the turn, and the model has to be in base contact and have done nothing in the entire preceding turn. So no movement, no nothing. They just have to have been in contact that turn.
No movement at all?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. So you can't just move up to the siege engine and at the end of the turn just dismiss it.
Yeah.
Because that would be really powerful if you didn't have priority.
Exactly.
Because then you can just move up to it and there's no counterplay.
No, exactly. Okay.
Yeah. Everything else is the same. The scattering, the fact you can't shoot into good combats as a good player, but you can shoot if you have a risk of a scatter, etc., etc. That's all the same. But generally there's a nerf here because of the whole static and the rotating and the, deployment stuff. And from what I've seen, siege engines have also gotten more expensive and they haven't gotten really anything in return for it. Like the Trebuchet already wasn't played at 80 points and now it's 100 points.
Yeah.
So generally it seems like siege engines are being pushed away into narrative play with a few choice exceptions like the Windlands. Like Dale has some specific bonuses for the Windlands which might make it see competitive play, and the Isengard Ballista might still be good enough to see play on the tabletop.
Okay, well, I guess it's fair because a lot of people were campaigning for sieges to be removed altogether from match play or be nerfed, so yeah.
But yeah, that's, I think, everything that I could see at a glance that was different from Siege. Overall, it's fine, I guess, but I'll have to wait and see what the profile of the bolt thrower is going to be like.
Yeah.
But I suspect we're not going to see a lot of Siege anymore in tournaments.
No, probably not. And totally okay with that.
Yeah, I won't warn it, but I do like me some bolt throwers. Matched play. Alright, moving into the rules for match play, we have some explanation from Games Workshop here about that you used to have alliances. and stuff, and that they removed it.
Just rub it in our faces.
Rub it in our faces. Let's not dwell on this too long.
No, it's pretty obvious how most people feel about this, and it is what it is. We're now stuck, sort of, with this way of army building, and I gotta say, I'm already passed over like the major negatives I had with it, and I've already come to accept the new ways. So it is what it is.
So there's another section here that specifically goes into how to calculate bow limit and throwing weapon limit. Like we mentioned earlier, the throwing weapon limit is new. It's exactly the same as bow limit. They are separate. So you can now have a third of your army with bows, another third of your army with throwing spears if they're separate models, and then a third everything else. This hurts Rohan and Corsair specifically, and a few other armies. We have the new term of general, which is the same as leader in the current edition, or previous edition, depending on when you listen to this. The general now also gains dominant 3, which is nice, unless they already have better dominance, because a lot of things do have better dominance than that. So this is good. Let's see, hero tiers are not different, but they are now part of the armor list. Legends notably still get their auto pass the first time they have to take a courage test for being broken. Oh, yeah, this is the big one. Objective markers have now been clarified that they are in fact 25 millimeters. This is no longer a recommendation, this is now a requirement, which I think is good. And models can now move freely over objectives. This was always the case, people played it this way, but it wasn't necessarily specifically stated somewhere. But this is the big one. You can no longer end your move overlapping an objective marker. So you can no longer use like a 40 mil cavalry base or a Wargear base to just stop an enemy from being able to move into base contact with an objective altogether.
This is very good. Yeah, because like those occasions where you played Seize the Prize and Wargear was landing on an objective, it was like, come get it, bro. It was no fun.
Yeah. You can also not back away onto an objective. You cannot end there with spells or whatever. The only way you can stop an opponent from getting to an objective is just surrounding it with dudes.
Yep.
So this is good.
Yep.
The only exception here are siege engines. Sorry, not siege engines. They are also listed as an exception, or as not being able to do it. But war beasts and chariots might still end their move on it because they can move over it.
Yeah.
It specifically says infantry and cavalry, etc. But it doesn't mention chariots and war beasts.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's probably to prevent your opponent from just hiding behind an objective marker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and then not being able to trample them with a war beast.
Yeah, no.
So I think it's fair.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep.
There's also a mention here that we're getting a new match play guide.
Yeah, that's cool. Yay.
Which is very big news.
Yeah.
It will have 24 total scenarios. We'll also have 6 double scenarios in addition.
All right. So we're getting like how many new scenarios? 8 new?
No, it's 6 new.
6. Oh, we used to have
we
18.
have 18 right now.
All right. Yeah. Cool. So that's awesome.
Yeah, we used to have 12, and then the match play guide added another 6 for a total of 18. And now the next match play guide is going to add another 6.
So would that be a new scenario for each pool, maybe?
Honestly, I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. Okay.
In this book, we have 6 scenarios that we already know. They've just been changed, which we'll get to in a minute. There are some clarifications about how VPs are scored. They are now clarified to be scored at the end of the game. And also, interestingly enough, is that a 4x4 board is now specifically mentioning that you can choose any side for deployment. But this is frequently not played that way on tournaments because of logistics.
Yeah.
You know, the way tables are set up. So I would ignore this because TOs usually don't agree with this, and for a good reason.
I mean, I think it would be wise for TOs to agree that to put this in the rules pack specifically, because there definitely will be players that will point towards the rules manual and say, no, I can definitely do this, and that would be hard to not get an argument around this.
Yeah, but come on. If you're like, you have a giant row of tables, and you're fighting like next to other people,
and
then you choose to have a side as your deployment zone, and you can't even reach your own models because you have to lean over all the table and stuff. Like, no, fuck off.
Yeah, it's
don't be that person.
Of course, yeah.
What I do think is weird is that there's still a section in here that the game is designed as a good versus evil game. It clearly isn't, because all events, except the ones at Warhammer World, I suppose, are frequently not good versus evil, let's put it that way.
Free for all.
But it suggests that they're still balancing it for good versus evil, which I don't think is the case. Like,
no. Yeah, it's probably just a legacy thing or something. I mean, legacy as in it already was there. So, yeah. Don't know.
I think that's it in terms of just general rules for match play. Not massive changes, just a few tiny tidbits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not huge changes, just clarifications mostly.
Scenarios. So, the last bit of the book, the final few pages, got us all really excited when they were leaked.
Yeah.
Because scenarios are changing. Not only are we getting the 6 new ones that we just mentioned in the new match play guide, no idea when, so I can't wait for that. But all of the existing scenarios look to have been rewritten to a maximum of 20 victory points, up from 12.
Yeah. I think it's important to note as well that we won't be covering these scenarios totally in depth. In this podcast, we'll be mentioning like the highlights and changes, and there will be a separate podcast where we will be covering like matched play scenarios and strategies and such.
Yeah, I think we might just do a podcast in a few months where we share our first impressions of the new meta, and that will also include a review on the new scenarios and how they play out. I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because like right now we can't say anything about how these scenarios will play out.
Yeah, we haven't played like one scenario, so we'll cover the changes and nothing more.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, let's dive into the scenarios and just go over each of them quickly and have some thoughts and leave it at that, because obviously we'll have to play them to actually see how they will play out.
Yeah, exactly.
So the first one's domination. The setup's still the same as we're used to. For all of these scenarios, by the way, they are the same as now, except the VP scoring has changed. So we will only cover the VP scoring differences and then share our thoughts on that, because everything else is identical. So domination, still 5 markers. For each marker, you score 1 point if you have more models within 3 inches of your opponent. If you have at least twice as many, you score 2. And if you're the only player there, you have 3. It used to be uncontested for 2, and now it's twice as many for 2 and uncontested for 3, which is a bigger spread. So you can get up to 15 points for having all 5 of them uncontested, which is unlikely, but possible. You score 1 point for wounding the enemy leader and 2 points for killing them. 1 point for breaking and 3 for breaking and not being broken. So those are quite similar to how they are now. So this scenario did not change much in terms of spirit. It's still the same scenario, but now it gives a little bit more nuance to the scoring on objectives, because it used to be uncontested and just having more, which meant that if you just had a single model somewhere annoying someone or moving into range of the objective at the final turn, you could steal VPs away from them. And uncontested objectives were very important compared to contested ones, because they were worth twice as much.
Yeah.
And now with the 3 for uncontested and 2 for just having double, a 3 versus 2 is less big of a difference than a 2 versus a 1.
Yeah, exactly.
In the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Next up, to the death. So that's the Killy scenario of 12-inch deployment. Still the same deployment and condition, etc. Victory points. You get 1 for wounding the enemy general if they only have 1 wound remaining. If they were wounded and only have 1 wound remaining, so you don't auto-score this against Nazgul, you score 3. And if the enemy general was removed as a casualty, you instead score 5. So 1, 3, or 5 for general. 3 victory points for the enemy army being broken. 5 if you are not broken and they are broken. You score 2 victory points if your opponent has no banners remaining at the end of the game. If they didn't have a banner to start with, you automatically score this. You score 1 victory point if you have at least 1 banner remaining at the end of the game. If you have more banners remaining in your opponent, then instead you score 2 victory points. And you score 3 victory points if the enemy army has been reduced to a quarter. And finally, you score 1 victory point for each enemy hero model that you kill, up to a maximum of 3. Notably, this also counts for the general, so killing the general is worth 6 victory points in total. Wow. A few thoughts here. Banners, hello.
Yeah.
Worth up to 4 victory points for banners. It already was a thing in To the Death. So To the Death was the scenario for shooting armies that had a banner. because sometimes if you were lucky, you were ahead on victory points, but in the worst case, that you were the same, and then you can still use your shooting.
Yeah.
And that hasn't really changed. So the spirit of the scenario hasn't really changed, but my God, our armies that don't bring a banner are now 4-0 behind on the victory points.
Oh man, this is hard. Especially considering that there are a lot of armies that can't even bring a banner to begin with anymore. Wow. This is going to be hard.
Yeah. Then again, 4-0 sounds really strong, but that's not 4-0 in a 12 maximum point game. It's 4-0 in a 20 point maximum game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a.
If you run up to the opponent, still kill their army, and sure, they have a banner after the end, you still win.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that won't really change, but it's still a big deal.
Yeah, you can still try to snipe out banners as well, so you won't get that much of a difference, but it's going to be hard.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on. The third scenario is Hold Ground, which is Maelstrom, and unfortunately, Maelstrom rules have not been changed.
Yeah, that's too bad. Yeah.
Yeah. In the Netherlands, we have been playing alternative Maelstrom quite frequently recently. That basically means that you do roll for Maelstrom as normal, but it's now at the end of the move phase for both players, so after both players have moved, and then you alternate between warbands that haven't come on yet. So it's a little bit less punishing to have priority on turn 1.
It changed a little bit, because now if you have priority, I think you can give away the Maelstrom deployment to the other player, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's actually quite a big change for Maelstrom scenarios.
Yeah, but honestly, the only difference is that now if you roll higher, you're happy instead of sad.
Yeah, exactly, because you're never choosing to come on first.
Probably not, no.
Yeah, no.
Because there's no incentive to do so.
Exactly, yep.
Especially because, trample and stuff and can no longer be done. But that also was something that you wanted to go second for, so no, you're not doing this.
No.
Anyways, for scoring, you score 4 victory points if you have more models within 6 inches of the center. You score 8 for having twice or more. You score 12 for having 3 times as many, or being the only one with models there. Yeah,
Still huge.
pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's just inflation for points. Let's see, 1 and 3 for general wound or kill, 1 or 3 for breaking without being broken, and here it is, 2 if your opponent has no banners remaining at the end of the game.
Yeah, and this is an addition, like the banner VPs in this scenario.
Yes.
Yeah.
This didn't used to have this.
No. It's big.
Yeah, it's only 2 out of 20 instead of 4 for the previous one, but it's enough.
It definitely is, yeah.
It can help. But then again, in what situation are they going to make difference?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big incentive to, if you have like a Maelstrom rules, especially if you deploy last, to just park your banner in the corner of the board, because everything else has to move to the central objective. So park it in a corner and you're pretty much have 2 VPs in the pocket.
Yeah, well, I can only see one situation where the banner VPs will make a difference. That is if your opponent somehow has twice as many as you in the center objective, but you manage to break them and kill their general without breaking yourself or having your own general being wounded or killed, and you have a banner and they don't, then you both end on 8 victory points.
Yeah, so there's a case to be made there for like shooting armies, basically, to just stick around the board edges and just shoot the entire game.
Yeah, like another one that could happen is that one person has more models in the center, but it's really close.
Yeah.
So they gain 4, but they lost a general, so the opponent gains 3, and the opponent has a banner. And then they win 5-4, despite not having the center objective.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So no, it can matter actually. Okay,
Yeah.
so I stand corrected. The banner VPs can matter.
Yeah, actually, quite a few scenarios there where it definitely does matter. Yeah.
The fourth scenario is one of my personal favorites. It's destroy the supplies. I love this one. So for the victory points, because again, that's the only thing that changed here. You score 3 victory points for each enemy supply marker that was destroyed. You score 1 victory point for each enemy supply marker that has not been destroyed, but you have more models within 3 inches than your opponent. So you're close to destroying it, but you're not quite
This is
there.
new.
This is new. If you have destroyed more supply markers than your opponent, you score 1 victory point. So you just gain an extra one for some reason. You score 1 victory point if the enemy general was wounded, 3 if they were killed, 1 for breaking the enemy, 3 for doing so without being broken. You score 2 victory points if your opponent has no banners remaining, If they didn't have a banner to start with, you automatically score this again. And here it is again, 1 victory point if you have a banner at the end of the game, and 2 if they have none.
Yeah.
Or sorry, if you have more than your opponent. Destroyer supplies used to already have banner VPs, so that's not a change either.
Yeah, it's just
there
more.
More.
Yeah.
It's more
Yep.
more now. Yeah. I like the change with the having more models near an enemy supply marker.
Yeah,
For one.
me too.
It can basically there's lots of tiebreaker stuff in here, which is, I like that. That's nice.
Yeah,
So it feels like it's less likely to come to a tie.
yeah, and it incentivizes you even more to move towards your opponent's objectives instead of staying around and just shooting. It's still strong in this scenario, but it's there are more incentives there to just walk over and try to destroy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is already the case, but you destroy a marker at the end of a turn if you are base contact with it and you haven't fought, shot, or cast a magical spell or shot, do something like that. You can only have moved.
Yeah.
I think it was already that way.
Yeah, it definitely was. Yep.
Okay. Next up, we have another favorite of mine, but a hatred for a lot of other people. Reconnoiter. I somehow always have good games on Reconnoiter because you use the whole board. But I can understand why people hate it if you are up against a very mobile army. It's very hard to win.
Yeah.
Anyways, there's a few changes here other than just the VPs. Actually, there's one change other than VPs. It now specifies that the bonus for not coming on the first turn is cumulative. It used to say you get a +1 if you didn't come on the previous turn. And now it's like you get a +1, and then on turn 3, if you didn't come on turn 1 or 2, you get a +2.
Yeah.
On turn 4, you automatically come on because then you get a +3, and 1 + 3 is 4, which is enough.
Yep.
Okay. Victory points for Reconnoiter. You score 4 if you have more models that have left the battlefield. And keep in mind, dominance counts for this. If you have twice as many and at least 2, you score 8. If you have at least 3 and 3 times as many, you score 12. So that's just straight up inflation from 3, 6, 9 to 4, 8, 12. Then you get 1 victory point for each of your hero models that escapes the board.
This is new.
So if you up to 3 maximum, and I'm not sure if dominance counts here.
Ooh, I think so, because it's like 2 separate conditions, right? It
has the same wording as the other one,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't see why not. So if Guire flies off the board, it counts as 3 heroes.
Yeah.
And 4 models or whatever he has.
No, it
that's
counts as 1 hero, right? 1 hero, but 3 models.
I don't know. It might just count as 4 heroes.
How would you reckon that?
Because he has dominant, and that makes him count as more models, and it's still a hero.
Okay, I'm not sure about that. We'll have to wait and see.
I agree with the sentiment that it should only count as 1 hero, but as written, it might actually be argued that it counts as multiple, and that's why it should be addressed in FHQ.
Yeah, agreed.
1 for wounding the general, and 2 for killing it, 1 for breaking, and 3 for without being broken. So by far the majority of the points here are in getting off the board, and now some extra emphasis is on getting heroes off the board rather than just troops.
Yeah, because there used to be very little value to getting heroes off the board, and now there's definitely a lot more. I think it's worth noting as well here that the reinforcements special rule is in effect here, and the reinforcements rule has been changed for people that skipped to this part of the podcast. You can now move onto the board from a point within 3 inches of where the hero moved on. You don't have to move on from the exact point that the hero moved on.
Which is fine. It's not a massive deal.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. And the last of the 6 scenarios included in the main rules book is Fog of War. So Fog of War is still the same premise. You still have to choose secret objectives. You choose your own hero model, your enemy hero model. You choose a terrain piece wholly within your opponent's half of the board. And you go after those objectives. Notable change is that it now specifies that for the target terrain piece that you're trying to capture, it only counts models touching. It doesn't have to be wholly within anymore, which used to be the language, which was really awkward because a lot of tables would have like walls and stuff or ruins that it's impossible to be wholly within of.
Yeah, this is much better.
Yeah. Although I wish it would include language about that it has to be at least, I don't know, 2 by 2 inches or something. So that scatter terrain doesn't count as a target for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because now you can have that argument where I chose this low little wall, and it's like, yeah, really, you know.
But usually you tend to agree upon which terrain pieces are eligible before you start the game. At least I do, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and you should still do so. But I would just have liked it if it was included in the scenario.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Okay, so for the target hero that you want to kill, it's still, want to keep alive, still can't be your general unless you only have one hero. You score 1 if they are alive, you score 3 if they have suffered no wounds, and then you score 5 if they have suffered no wounds and have not used any of their fate in order to do so. Interestingly enough, it says spend no fate points. I'm not sure how that works with passengers and heroic mounts. I think it still counts. So if you spend Shadowfax's fate, you now only score 3 rather than 5. But again, this could be argued the other way. Same for the opponent hero that you want to target. You score 1 for causing a wound. If they are prevented by fate, they do not count. If they have been removed as a casualty, you score 3. And if they have been removed as a casualty as a result of one of your models wounding them in combat, you score 5. So this doesn't have the clause about fate and stuff. This just gives you extra points for killing them in combat.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know if I like this because there are certain armies that are specifically geared towards like shooting, for instance.
Yeah, or just making people run after breaking them.
Yeah. This feels like a penalty to that.
Yeah, because like if they break and they suspect, one of their weaker heroes was your target and they manage to keep it safe from now on, they might just deliberately try and make that hero run away.
Yeah, exactly.
Not spend will points to pass the courage test and stuff like that. And then deny you the 5 instead of the 3 if they're worried that you would be able to kill them that turn anyways. So yeah, this is strange, but I do like things that encourage people to fight rather than to kill things with shooting and stuff like that. But then again, it always feels nice if you manage to achieve an objective just through using shooting or magic. I don't know. There's something nice about that.
Yeah.
Not everything has to be about killing people in close combat, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. About terrain piece. So you score 1 VP if you have more models touching that or on the terrain piece than your opponent. If you have 2 models and twice as many, you score 3. And if your opponent has no models and you have at least 2, so it's not 3 times as much, it has to be uncontested, then you score 5. Fog of War now also has leader VPs. That's new. It didn't used to.
Yeah.
It's 1 for wounding and 2 for killing. And there's 1 for breaking and 3 for being unbroken.
Yeah, good changes. I think as a general note, I might have liked to have seen increments in breaking as well. And what I mean by that is that you scored victory points for breaking, more victory points for being for breaking him and not being broken yourself. But also, I'd like to have seen victory points for quartering your opponent.
Yeah. Well, we still have it in to the death, but that's the only scenario that has it so far.
Yeah, maybe those a few more increments in those scorings in other scenarios would have been fun. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway here is that 3 of the 6 scenarios have banner VPs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
and one of
big.
those didn't used to have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
50% is huge. Like it will have a short period of meta before the new match play guide comes out where banners are super important. And then if it turns out that in the new match play guide there's maybe 1 extra scenario that has a banner VPs for a total of 5 out of 24, it's fine. Nobody cares. Like you basically have the same thing as you have now where yes, banners are important, but you can make do without. And if you run into a scenario where there's banner VPs, it sucks, but you just kind of have to deal with it. But if this is the tone for the new scenarios where about half of them will have banner VPs, yeesh, it will really be hard on those armies.
It really will, yeah. For instance, I'm going to start painting up Thranduil's halls. That doesn't have a banner right now, and I mean it's not going to stop me from running it, but still, it's going to put me in a pretty big disadvantage in a lot of the games.
And I am actually looking at some armies that I want to play, like Men of the West, where LSR is a 6-inch banner.
Yeah.
And I might just still take a Warrior of Ministry of banner, because
I think I probably would, yeah.
I mean, at really low points, maybe not, but
higher points, definitely.
Yeah. Because, the first tournament that we're having here in the Netherlands is going to be the 400 to 600 point escalation league, or tournament by Larry.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you run LSR at 400 points, you can bring a banner, but that actually hurts your model count because you can't just fill up his warband with dudes.
Yeah.
And not bring a banner, and still you run out of points. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see for like the other scenarios in the match play guide to make like definitive feelings about this. But yeah, banners are definitely a thing right now.
Yeah, I like the fact that we went to 20 over 12.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to withhold judgment on the execution until I see the rest of the scenarios, because there's a few in here where I'm like, yeah, you just inflated the normal points, and others have changed significantly, like Fog of War giving general VPs now. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So
yeah, true.
Yeah,
we'll have to wait and see. I think right now it's half and half, like things that changed and didn't change in the scenarios, but we'll have to wait for the new ones as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we've come to the end of today's podcast, Kevin.
Yeah.
I'm pretty tired.
I'm looking at my Audacity recording, and we're at 4 hours and 6 minutes.
Yep.
So that probably means that this podcast is gonna, after editing, clock in at just shy of 4 hours.
True. Yeah. So we most definitely won't be doing a community spotlight because this thing is long enough already.
Yeah. We hope this was helpful for you.
Yeah.
It certainly was for us. Like we made a whole document comparing stuff. It was helpful to go through it. I hope this has helped you to wrap your head around the rules changes for the new edition. Please let us know via mail, via comments, via smoke signals. I don't care what you think of the new edition, of the new rules. Like we mentioned during the intro, we are quite pleased.
Yeah.
Overall, these rules changes are positive in terms of balance, positive in terms of language. There's a few misses. Hopefully they'll just get FAQ'd. But overall, I think this is a solid win from GW.
Definitely, yeah. And to add to that, if you think we got something wrong with the rules interpretations or things we left out or something like that, also please let us know so we can redact that. Possibly in this podcast already and go back and do some editing, but probably in a later episode or something. But yeah, I'd love to know.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Until next time, at Lowlands Wargaming.
See you later.
Thank you for making it this far and listening to the Lowlands Wargaming podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please keep in mind this podcast is a labor of love. We're not affiliated or sponsored by anyone, and our opinions are completely our own. If you have feedback, questions, or simply would like to get in touch, you can reach us at lowlandswargaming@gmail.com. For now, have an utmost excellent day, and see you at the next episode.